What's going on, guys? Back with another episode of the Winning Browns podcast. This is episode 14, if I'm not mistaken. A podcast in which two Indian kids try to win more subscribers than the Browns win Super Bowls. Just so happened that the Super Bowl was this past week. A miserable week for me. Definitely, indeed. I cried an hour after the Super Bowl. I was really angry. I went through the 5 stages of grief. Um, and now I won the sixth one. If any of you have watched Cruella, you know what the sixth one is, revenge. I want to get back to the Super Bowl, but it was one hell of a Super Bowl. We will be talking about that very soon to come in this episode. Um, but as we all know, the NFL season's over. That doesn't stop the grind for us. We continue talking about the NFL season as pretty much NFL is a 24/7, 365-day of the year um, program that continues on, whether it's draft, offseason, free agency, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's just how the NFL works. And I mean, we've got a hell of a off season we have a hell of an off-season schedule for y'all. Definitely, I mean, we're talking about mock drafts and kind of introducing you to some of the great prospects that are in this draft. This is one of my favorite times talking about the draft and free agency, kind of understanding like the creativity. I know Akhilesh has his own opinions on certain schematics and how certain players fit on that. Reminds me of one discussion we had of one Jesse Bates last year. Um,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
mean, hey, there's going to be a lot of stuff that we have planned as far as how to basically take this channel to the next level. Obviously, in a bit of some sort of stalemate as far as our subscribers go. I We appreciate the support of all of y'all who have tuned in every week, who have tuned in even once. I mean, the support that we get from y'all, the people that have commented on videos, we
yeah.
love the feedback. Would appreciate as much as you guys can give us. Appreciate all the sharing that you guys can do to kind of
Promote the channel,
the
to say the
channels
least.
on higher bigger platforms, because our goal is to be able to make football understandable to even the everyday person, something that
Yeah,
not always the case, but we have a lot
and,
of fun
and
talking
it's
about
something that I think. Sorry for interrupting, but it's
that.
something that we both can relate to because, you know, growing up, at least from my perspective, I can say this. My parents don't know football. My brother doesn't know football. My grandparents, and nobody in my family really
Exactly.
knows. Other than my cousin's side, nobody in my family really knows football. I learned it along the way. Um, and I think that it's not an easy sport to understand. It's a sport that I still fail to understand in many respects, if I'm being very honest.
Yeah,
But I think it's a process, it's a journey that, regardless of anything that you're doing in life, any subject, if we're really being honest, and I think
very
we just
applicable.
exactly we just go through those stages, and you guys are learning, I'm learning. Probably I need to learn a lot more than you guys also already know. So if I'm being very honest, so we appreciate everybody who's supporting the channel on a continuous basis. We want to improve the channel along the way. We have ideas to improve the channel, but your support really means the world when it comes to improving the channel.
Yeah.
So
And I mean,
appreciate it all.
as part as what we're gonna do. So if anyone has questions on that, I mean, for starters, the big thing is we're gonna be releasing a lot more short content to start off with. YouTube Shorts has definitely taken over YouTube, as we all know, based on the whole idea of these scrolling videos, as I like to call it. But we're going to be releasing, but as the draft season gets closer and closer, we're going to be releasing videos on draft rankings, on what our opinions are on certain positions and certain players in drafts, and we'll be talking about them for sure on our long content and these podcast episodes. But we will also be kind of spreading our wings out more into different forms of videos across YouTube. We will be discussing the NFL Combine. We will be discussing free agency and having different styles of predicting free agencies. We will have a lot more of the types of videos where we are um, discussing what if scenarios,
Yeah.
We have a whole plan as far as explaining football to the everyday audience through something called Football 101. Um, we have, we're obviously going to discuss the several changes that occurred with the coaching staffs and whatnot,
Yeah.
and continue to give
Expand
you
the
a
channel
glimpse of
for
training
that
camp like
process.
we did last summer. And I hope you guys enjoy it. I really do, because it's going to be
Yeah.
fun.
However, what we're gonna speak on now is not fun for one individual specifically. I'm just gonna set off an intro, and I think I'm just gonna give it to you because it is your spiel to talk on. I had my moments with my Chargers and the Patriots, and you didn't have to suffer like that, but you've had to suffer in another way that I've never personally experienced before. So, for no further ado, it's all
Well,
up to you.
here's the thing. I'm going to start off with. I'm proud of my San Francisco 49ers. They fought till the end. They showed more willpower than I've ever seen from the 49ers in any game that they've, and that's saying a lot, because they have, in any game that they have had throughout, in any big game that they have lost, is what I'm saying. When I'm talking about the New York Giants loss in 2011, the 2012 Ravens Super Bowl. They played this game as this almost as perfect. There were a few flaws, obviously, but almost as perfect as any fan could have wanted, right? From a fan standpoint, you wanted your team to fight defensively against the best quarterback in football and not be able to put him in the end zone like it seems almost inevitable almost every down, which is what we did in the fourth quarter when the chips were on the line. We held him down and we gave ourselves another shot. Okay. Throughout the game, we dealt with injuries. We dealt with all of this just peculiar and odd stuff. And we still found ourselves in the game against the best player in football, against the best tight end, maybe in NFL history. And I'm now able to say that a lot more because of just his postseason accolades. I'm not 100% on that, but he's most certainly in that conversation. One of the best coaches in football, and I'm proud of my Niners. But that to be said, there is a lot left to be desired. And I'll speak on two different sides, as a fan and as far as what I observed as just an analyst of the game. Um, as a fan, I'm thoroughly pissed. I wasn't as much pissed until I saw what happened on Monday. We saw the report about apparently Kyle Shanahan did not know the overtime rules. Most of the 49ers did not know the overtime. And there was some clarification whatnot throughout the postseason. But the best summary that had been given about the whole situation was that Kyle Shanahan didn't really expect an overtime Super Bowl. And given the circumstances, he basically had not really put too much focus on it. So he had basically told his position coaches to talk to the players on an individual basis and basically explain to them the overtime rules, which is what happened. Purdy claimed that, what was his name? Brian Greasy came out to him and basically talked about the rules in as far as overtime. Christian McCaffrey said the same thing about the running backs coach. Nick Bosa said the same thing. But at the same time, it just goes to show you the lack of game planning. And I think that was something that was left most certainly one of the biggest question marks about this game. Kyle Shanahan, I think, has improved a lot as a head coach since 2017. I know last year you were talking about if they didn't make the playoffs, he was going to get fired. And given the expectations of this team, maybe that was the case, maybe that wasn't. I look, I don't know what goes on in John Lynch and Parag Marate's head, but the fact of the matter is Shanahan has improved tremendously as a head coach. I used to criticize him like crazy his first 4 years. I used to think that he was extremely conservative, extremely cocky, extremely arrogant, and was extremely overrated. Okay, he had his good traits. He was a very creative play caller, but creative more like, you know, the once in every blue moon play that Mike McCarthy might pull out of his butt, right? That type of creative. That's what I felt about him. Okay, I felt like the talent of this team was partially, more responsible for where they were. I thought that Kyle Shanahan could only make it work with certain quarterbacks. So whether your opinion on Jimmy Garoppolo is like this high or this low doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is Jimmy Garoppolo had a huge responsibility, or a huge he is extremely responsible for a lot of Kyle Shanahan's success, especially early on in his career. You talk about the run schemes, whatnot, but in the last 3 years, Kyle Shanahan has improved as a coach. He's developed this team a lot. I mean, they won they won 13 games last year in spite of having four different quarterbacks, including Brock Purdy, which say what you want. He was a very good quarterback. I'm not at all saying that. I will get to that in a sec. But
Just one thing. The aspect of four quarterbacks is really not something that you want to bring up because really it was two quarterbacks that were interchanged throughout the
correct,
season when it mattered most. But
correct.
yeah,
But at the same time, you got to think about it. Those All of them had pretty much at some point played elite football. Trey Lance for a very short amount of time, granted, that was the first drive of the Seattle
elite
Seahawks
though,
game,
elite.
and elite, yeah, against the Seahawks in that first drive, he was playing like an elite quarterback. Okay, the Bears game, absolutely not. You're absolutely correct. Then Jimmy G was playing like a top 10 quarterback and was having the best year of his career. I will say that. Okay, he might not have the traits of like a Mahomes, Burrow, whatever. I'm not saying that either, but he was playing like that. Then you got Purdy, who took this offense to an entirely new level. So you're talking about these three quarterbacks, all right? They had, I mean, they were having their best quarterback season, and I think a lot of that has to do with the changes Kyle Shanahan made in the system. I think you saw a lot of evolution in what he did as far as his play calling in 2021, how it transformed as he perfected it in 2022. But the reason all of this is what I'm saying is I don't know if that was the case this year. After looking at what happened with the overtime thing, I kind of had a little bit of a debriefing on the entire season and certain moments. And the more and more I think about it, I feel like as much as Shanahan was a great play caller and definitely deserves his flowers there, I don't know if his coaching was necessarily as much there this year than compared to previous years. I feel like this team was so good, they pretty much played themselves into a Super Bowl. They were coaching themselves at some point. And you look at, and there are certain games where I can really kind of like take certain moments and put them under a microscope and give you them as examples. The most notable example for me is the Ravens game. This was a team that was dead in the water. Kyle Shanahan's play calling was trash in that game, just trash, utterly trash. The Ravens had them beat on every level. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not sure if they were going to win. Certainly not. I mean, they were down 14 points, and the Ravens defense, again, like I said, was all over them. But I mean, this was a team that was on the 1 yard line, okay, with 1 minute, 5 seconds to go, with two timeouts. Regardless of how little the chances or whether they did it, they had a chance to win the game. All Shanahan had to do was not mess up that play, and you at least had a chance, okay? And he messed up that play so badly that they lost 4 yards and didn't even have a chance on fourth down. Okay. So that's one of the plays where you think about it and you're wondering, is it Christian McCaffrey who is, getting these big runs that is, that get the Niners in first down territory every time? He's breaking more tackles, doing more than any other running back, and at age 27, which is usually an older age for running backs, he's doing way more than most running backs are asked to at that age. A lot of people criticize Brock Purdy, and I will get to this right now. I mean, I'm sick and tired. I don't care right now if you think Purdy is, the elite tier with Mahomes, or you think that he is, or you think that he's closer to like Dak Prescott or something. Okay, Prescott had an MVP season, that's why I'm bringing him up. But like the fact that matters, he's a top 10 quarterback. He is certainly not a game manager. Okay, the fact that matters, he was given certain times where he was asked to play make. He was asked to do things outside the offense, and he did them at a very, very high level. Okay, he'd twirl out of the pocket when the Lions were all over him and throw a pass to Kyle Juszczyk. He'd twirl out of the pocket, find George Kittle down the field for an insane throw. He'd get outside the pocket, across his body, throw to Ayuk. Those are things that you can't replicate. Okay, and when people talk about, oh, he throws checkdowns and whatnot, maybe you need to see where the checkdowns are coming. This is not like what I've criticized Kirk Cousins in the past for, where Kirk Cousins would look through three reads and then throw a check down to a guy who was covered. This was all right. First read, this is a screenplay pass to Debo Samuel, who they'll throw a check down to, okay, because he's right there, and the play gets blown up. Okay. That to me is more Kyle Shanahan. The fact that the blockers are not there. The scheme is just so obvious that defenses can read it so many times. I mean, I feel like the Browns game
Was
kind
that
of
this
left the
season?
blueprint. Yes, this season, it's more than ever. And and even then, Brock Purdy had 9.9, if I'm not mistaken, 9.9 air yards per attempt. Okay, I think that's the most ever since the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so anybody who's sitting here saying that Brock Purdy is a game manager, that's just plain false. Okay, that is plain false. And I think we need to look at Kyle Shanahan under a microscope and realize that there are some problems with him, and those problems get exposed in the postseason. He can carry his way through the regular season. Very good coach. I'm not questioning his coaching credibilities anymore. Um, but he can't get through the big game, especially when you have a guy who out coached him. And we talked about this last episode. We talked about Kyle Shanahan had to coach the best game of his career if he wanted to win this game. That was what was going to define the game. And even Steve Wilkes, which I'll get to in a sec. Okay. And they didn't. Steve Wilkes, when it came down to the clutch decisions, he could not deliver. All right. He did not blitz when it was necessary. He did not drop back when it was necessary. He gave Mahomes easy, wide open lanes in overtime to run. He gave Travis Kelce the entire middle of the field. All right. With even after Dre Greenlaw had left, and Dre Greenlaw was the key into the game. That's what I'll say. Greenlaw, what the fact that Greenlaw got hurt, I think that was one of the big reasons why we lost. And it's kind of eerie. I'm saying this as a Niners fan right now. I've had conspiracy theories that, something was just eerie about that Vegas, just the whole Vegas environment and what had happened. And I feel like the NFL was out to get us. But
The cards were
realistically,
stacked against you guys. The cards were stacked against you guys. That was a good
yeah,
come on. That's
yeah,
a good
yeah.
point. Come on,
But I mean,
give me that.
the fact of the matter is, give me 1 sec. I'll be right back.
To viewers out there
Okay.
right now,
So
I'm
sorry,
right with you guys.
my wires disconnected. But the fact of the matter was that once Greenlaw left the game, all right, once Greenlaw left the game, Kelce went high. I remember Jim Nance talking about this. He had one reception for 1 yard before
Yeah,
Greenlaw left. And this was, mind you, the same quarter that he bumped into Andy Reid infamously. After that, he had 54 yards in the third quarter, and then he finished, I think, with something like 80 or 90 yards, right? If I'm not mistaken. So,
something around there.
I
Yeah.
mean, I cannot underestimate. I cannot state how important Greenlaw was to us losing. And I feel like just everything collapsed. Again, when I'm talking about Steve Wilkes, we saw it was a little surprising given that he was the 1 year that he got fired and whatnot. You did call it, I know that, Akilesh. But at the same time, it was coming. You knew about it. I feel like he wasn't the greatest fit, especially for the Niners' identity for what they've accumulated talent wise and how they've performed defensively over the last couple of years. But we'll see what happens with the Niners defense, who they decide to hire. There are a lot of interesting names out there who I think they're going to hire in house and go after the defensive backs coach. I don't know why I'm forgetting his name. But the 49ers, I mean, I'm very confident. I think they will be back, but they got to be careful about how they handle what happened during the Super Bowl. I don't feel it was the right thing to announce publicly that they didn't know the overtime rules. The whole contract situation with Ayuk is going to be tricky, and that's good. I mean, it's going to be tough for the 49ers. This could be something that breaks them. I don't think so. They're strong at will. Um, but they got to pick up the pieces and start right away if they want to really come back to the promised land, because it's not going to be that easy next year. You're going to have a lot more teams. The Packers are going to be better. The Eagles might be better with Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator. We'll see about the Hassan Reddick situation, whatnot. Um, We'll see about the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not exactly sure. The Lions, they retain both coordinators, so that's going to be key. We'll see what they do in the offseason. The Rams might be better. They're a young team. They're going to improve there. There are a lot of teams that have gotten better. So the Niners are not going to have as easy of a schedule next year. They're going to have to, they're really going to have to pick up the pace and set the standard for the NFC. Now, from the analyst standpoint, and just as a whole general standpoint for the Super Bowl, like I said, I talked about the Niners. For the Chiefs, this was a legacy defining Super Bowl for a lot of players. I already mentioned Travis Kelsey, who's cemented himself as certainly one of the greatest, I think, top three tight ends of all time. Even with his lack of blocking ability, he's in my opinion, now certainly the greatest postseason tight end of all time. Not even a question about that. Especially given Gronk's injuries and whatnot. And then as far as Mahomes and Reed, you and I've been talking about this. I'm a lot of people had after last year were crediting Mahomes as already a top 10 quarterback because of the two Super Bowls, two rings. I'm not a person who likes to give out, accomplishments right away. I want people to earn it. And statistically, of course, because Mahomes hasn't played long enough, he hasn't reached the same accolades as a guy like Dan Marino, Rogers, whatnot. Um, but if he had won that, I did say if he did win that third Super Bowl, you're comparing a guy who has been tested on so many levels, so many times, and has come clean at the end of it, no matter what. This was a legacy-defining Super Bowl for Patrick Mahomes. He delivered. He's one of the only great quarterbacks to win back-to-back Super Bowls alongside Montana, Bradshaw, Brady, Elway. And he's done it in better fashion. He's won 3 Super Bowl MVPs, better fashion than some of them. That's what I meant. He's won 3 MVPs as Super Bowl MVPs. He's won 2 MVPs. I think he's climbed up into that top 10 discussion, no doubt about that. It's a matter of where he is, whatnot. The same goes with Andy Reid. I mean, you're talking about him probably passing up guys like Don Shula, guys like, I don't know, he's to me on the same tier now, maybe as Joe Gibbs as far as the impact that he's had. Maybe Gibbs has more impact as far as his teams. I'm not debating that I'm not saying that he's better or worse than Gibbs, but he's certainly in the same tier. This was a legacy-defining Super Bowl for Andy Reid, and he delivered on that occasion. So this was a hell of a Super Bowl on so many levels. The hype was crazy. It delivered. The Taylor Swift storyline, unfortunately, is going to haunt me for the next 2 weeks. It's whatever, but this was a fun Super Bowl to watch. Regardless, it's just unfortunate for me as a Niners fan that I was on the wrong side of the Super Bowl, but it was a story to tell, and it's definitely going to be one of the greatest Super Bowls ever. If you look back at it in 10 years, 20 years, whatever.
You done?
Yeah. Oh, one other
Sheesh.
thing.
God,
One of
nah,
the
nah,
greatest defensive, one of the greatest defensive Super Bowls that I've seen in my lifetime. That's
oh
it.
no. Come on, no.
In my
All
lifetime.
right. Jeez Louise. God. Look, you covered a lot of points, and I do want to address all of them, but I also do want to consider the fact that we got a lot more to talk about. So, I will keep some things in that you mentioned. Steve Wilkes that I called last week to be fired. Look, I'm going to be very honest here. He had a great plan for that Super Bowl. The way he was able to contain Mahomes, bringing Nick Bosa off the edge. Um, it's not easy playing against Mahomes. I mean, for obvious reasons, but from a defensive end standpoint, being able to predict whether he's going to run on the outside or kind of give him the pressure inside and have that one hand on the outside just to I don't know if you guys can see, but if you're holding the offensive tackle here, just holding that hand outside
For
just in
sure.
case Mahomes on that outside, you have leverage to go here, etc. That gives space for the defensive tackles inside. So again, a little bit overview, just put out there. But he actually had a pretty good plan. I felt that when it came late in the game, look, this is a common quote by me that you guys have heard way too many times, but you have to execute when it matters most. That's where the great teams lie. I don't care if you're 9-8 or 16-0. You have to execute when it matters most, and that's what they did. Um, Look, I'm going to be very honest here. We, I went on the whole rant about how Patrick Mahomes is not the GOAT yet and all that stuff, but I'm going to be very honest here. He did what no quarterback in the NFL can do. He executed when it matters most. That's truly what he did. If you look at the situations that he was given, I mean, there was a clip where Shanahan questionable call up. I mean, not questionable, but went for the field goal. They were up 19-16, and the refs, they said you can't give Mahomes a ball with 1 minute left. And it came to bite back at the end. I mean, they were literally this close to winning the game before the fourth quarter ended. So um, from that standpoint, I think Steve Wilkes did a pretty good job. And there was a stupid statistic, and I must say, stupid statistic, given by Get Up, if I'm not wrong, where they had this whole thing about how D'Amico Ryan's in his
Oh yeah, I
season,
saw that. Yeah.
how 18 points per game. Steve Wilkes had 17 and all this hoopla. I'm like, dude, did you see that defense against the top tier teams? Yeah, they played pretty good against everybody else. Well, what did they do against Lamar Jackson? Horrible.
Yeah.
Against the Cleveland Browns. You don't give 14 points to the Cleveland. I don't care how good your defense is. You just don't give like what was it 14, 19 points to the Cleveland Browns, even though it's only 14. It's Cleveland Browns without Nick Chubb. It's Cleveland Browns without Deshaun Watson. It's Cleveland Browns with an XFL quarterback plus Kareem Hunt. Literally, that was their team. And you give up 14 points. That is
And people
disappointing.
talk about like the 2021 defense was a lot worse than the 2022 defense. If you're talking about the
Yeah.
2022 defense, which was the same as far as talent as the 23
Hmm.
or close to similar,
Yeah.
that's a better comparison. D'Amico Ryan's is far better. They average something like 14 points per game or
Yeah, I
15
mean,
points per game. So
to,
you
to
can't
me, to
compare
me, it
that.
was just stupid. It really was a stupid comparison to put it out there. But again, Steve Wilkes, I understand it's like, oh, he made it to the Super Bowl and y'all fired him in one game, but I think it was deserved at this point. Coming to Kyle Shanahan, look, this man, I said last season that if he didn't make the playoffs, considering how, um, if I may say, really wavy, if you guys get what I mean, the way he was taking that team um, I think that was one of the things that concerned me. That's why I said he would be fired. But he's done an incredible job. I mean, we talk about gutsy plays. What their first touchdown in the game was a trick play. That's a gutsy call to make against that Spags defense. Gutsy
For
call,
sure.
and credit to him in always just credit to him. But Kyle Shanahan not knowing the overtime rules is a big mistake. I think one of the things we credit Bill Belichick as to the greatest coach of all time, some may regard as, um,
Preparation.
it's knowing the situations. Situational football is what he prides himself with, and that's why they were so successful. I think. You look at the first Super Bowl Brady won. John Madden, who arguably is one of the greatest coaches of all time, he said they should they should take a timeout and make it go into overtime. That was situational football. They prepared to go down that field, get that field goal with Adam Vinatieri. So I think situational football is just one of those things that the 49ers didn't go over and that came to bite them at the end. Now, I want to dive into something that's, I think, the topic where it's about Purdy and being a game manager. Now, this is what I want to say. Tom Brady is a game manager, okay? John Elway, later in his career when he won Super Bowls, he was a game manager. Dan Marino was not a game manager, right? When we look at, let's say, Terry Bradshaw, he was a game manager. To a decent extent, he was a game manager. There's nothing wrong in being a game manager. We have this false narrative where being a game manager means you're conservative, means that you just want to get the small targets, you're not going for those big plays. I'm going to be very honest here. I think Brock Purdy is a game manager, and there's nothing wrong about it. I think it's perfect for him being a game manager. Kyle Shanahan's system is going to benefit off a game manager. Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Trey Lance in Shanahan's system. Brock Purdy is a better quarterback than both Jimmy Garoppolo and what was it, Trey Lance in Shanahan's system. Shanahan's system needs a game manager. He doesn't need a guy who can run the ball all the time or who's going to escape the pressure when needed. He doesn't need a Patrick Mahomes. There's nothing wrong in being nothing wrong. It's great being Patrick Mahomes, right? In all respects. But to his system, Purdy is a perfect fit because he is a game manager. I don't see anything wrong in being a game manager. The way it's defined on the outside is my problem. For me, a game manager is this. If I'm putting the hands on my quarterback if I'm giving the football in my quarterback's hands and I'm telling him, I want you to execute the plays, give it to the people that are going to make the plays happen, that's what I need. Joe Montana was a game manager, right? So I think the notion that he's a game manager is, first of all, the perfect notion. I just believe the way in which people perceive the term game manager is just wrong. So that's my standpoint on Brock Purdy. You can bring up all the analytics, but I'm just talking about from a pure game film standpoint. Yes, he's throwing checkdowns. You mentioned a great point when it comes to checkdowns. He's throwing the correct checkdowns. He's not throwing it to a running back when it's 3rd and 10 with 2 minutes left to go in the game. You need to make that play. He's not throwing a Hail Mary with the running back just stays on the inside post. Like he's giving the ball in the right places, even if it's a checkdown. Um, just on the side note, Joe Gibbs and Andy Reid in the same call. Let me just say this to ladies and gentlemen. Let me just explain something to y'all.
The same
Joe
tier.
Gibbs
I didn't
is
say
in
this. I didn't say that the one was better
Joe
than.
Gibbs is in a separate tier from every single NFL coach in NFL history. No, you want to make that face? Let me explain something to you. Tell me one coach in the history of football. I don't. You can bring up Nick Saban. You can bring up any Jimmy Johnson. Be anything
So in the history of football, because that means we could count high school football.
reasonable. Okay,
I'm joking. I'm joking.
college football and the NFL since Super Bowl era. Bring up any coach that took three. By the way, three quarterbacks that were not selected, right? I think in the first 3 rounds,
Yeah.
three different quarterbacks, the first 3 rounds within 1 decade to 3 Super Bowls, beating. If I'm not, wait, let me just count in my head.
The
Uh,
Broncos, they beat
no. Oh, okay, 1 minute. Yeah, name a head coach that took three separate quarterbacks to a Super Bowl and won it. First of all, give me a head coach that took in 1 decade three different quarterbacks to a NFL
you're correct.
championship or to a
Yeah, I
championship
get that
or to
point.
a
I
Super
get
Bowl.
that point. But
You
my
don't
here's my argument.
you bring up Vince. No, wait, 1 second. You just bring up Vince Lombardi. No. Bill Walsh, no. Joe Gibbs is in a separate category of head coaches. No one will reach that tier. No one. You can bring up two quarterbacks, and I say you're great. You
Okay.
don't put him on that level. By the way, we forget this. Andy Reid was notoriously known for that head coach who could never win at all.
Okay.
We forget that when he
Yeah,
was with the
for
Eagles,
sure.
he couldn't win it. I mean, we think about the talent that Eagles team had. That Eagles team could have won the Super Bowl against the Patriots.
For
Let's not
sure.
act as though
For sure.
that
For
was
sure.
off, right? So Joe Gibbs and anybody. This is no disrespect to Andy Reid. Andy Reid has solidified himself as one of the top 5 head coaches of all time, in my opinion, without
Okay.
a shred of a doubt.
Who would
But
you be? Who would be your other three? Four, just out of
other
curiosity.
4 coaches, I'm keeping Vince Lombardi, Bill Belichick, Bill Walsh, Andy Reid, Don Shula.
Don
Or
Shula.
not? No, wait. Let me reverse it. Andy Reid's fifth. Joe Gibbs is third. Bill Walsh is fourth. Bill Belichick is second. Number one is Vince Lombardi.
So
That's the
Don
tier.
Shula is out of your top five.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He's
Yeah.
not in my top 5 now. But
Okay. Okay. So
no disrespect. No
I have
disrespect.
a little bit of differences, but I get where you're coming from. I'm not again. If that's your argument, fine. I can get I
Yeah.
can get behind that. My
Look at the
argument
talent
were
too.
based
Look at
on
the
like
talent too. This is
yeah.
another thing I'm saying. Look at the talent, right?
That well,
You look at
yeah, that's part of it though. My argument was also kind of based on in an in-depth look at kind of Reed. You look at where he took the Chiefs from, even the Eagles from. I mean, he built them pretty much from the ground up and then took them
yeah.
to an entirely new level when once they got elite quarterbacks.
You know Joe Gibbs, right? Joe Gibbs, when he entered that season, when they started off, you know what the record was? 1-5, 0-5.
Yeah. So I mean,
He
yeah.
had,
I
he
mean,
had John
that's why I would
Riggins.
put them in the same tier. It's just a matter of like, I mean,
Joe Gibbs is in a separate tier.
preference.
Well, that's not the main topic.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned Dre Greenlaw. It was one of the most devastating things that I saw, and unfortunately, I couldn't see the Super Bowl. I've never actually been able to see a full NFL game in my life, guys. I've never been able to. I'm trying to accomplish that goal at some point in my life, but just never seems to happen. But Dre Greenlaw going out, I think that was one of the biggest factors going into the game. It's unfortunate. However, I do want to bring attention to fairly a important topic that's connected to the Super Bowl. Yesterday, February 14th, on Valentine's Day, unfortunately, there was the shooting incident that happened in Kansas City during the Kansas City Chiefs parade. Look, to me, sports is a way that we unite with each other, regardless of race, regardless of where you're from, how you are, who you are. It's about bringing people together to enjoy one thing in union. This is a game that has a lot of emotions, but in it all, there is some union that we all bring together. You can be a fan of a 49ers, you can be a fan of the Chiefs, but you're a fan of the NFL. You can be a fan of the Warriors or the Cavs, you're a fan of the NBA. And I think you bring it all together in one point. And what happened yesterday, in all accounts, was just atrocious. It forget an embarrassment by any means. It really is eye opening to the fact that we have to change. And in I understand it's a very atrocious event to say the least, but what I do want to bring the factor um, is that we all can change. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. And I think the only thing moving forward from this is that we change. And I think that can definitely happen because we are all intelligent people. People in prison to people out as millionaires, we're all intelligent. And I think we all can change for the better. So that's where I want to leave it at that. Yosh, take it.
I mean, you said it better than I could have said it. But what I will say is the actions of whoever was the shooter was. I haven't looked into it, but whoever that was, it's disgusting. It's senile. It's the worst thing you can do. And to do it on a day that people are uniting, people are celebrating, and on a day that is represents love in Valentine's Day, of course. It's the worst. It's one of the worst things that you can ever imagine. Um, Certainly, I will say that you had a quote. We talked about this last week. You had a something that you talked about where you said sports are the only thing where you can use hate in a good way. And I think it's important to understand that the idea of hate in sports, I hate this team, I hate the Seahawks, I hate the Rams, you hate Joe Burrow or whatever, that's a relative term because we don't actually hate them. At the end of the day, we hate them because there's a likability to hating them, right? But when you make yourself so personal to all these different battles or what happens, the outcomes, or just something that you feel that you need to take action with shooting, going out in public and shooting people, that's never the right thing. And we need to understand that there's a line for everything. There's a middle ground, and we need to stop crossing it as a society. And we need to look at the person next to us and realize that we might hate them for being a fan of a team, but we also love them, like you said, for being part of the NFL community or being for whatever community. And we should
Yeah.
love one another for being part of this world and being someone who every day of their life contributes to this world. And that's the best way I can really put it.
Yeah. Um, to the person who lost his or her life, we send their family our deep regards. Um, and I think we will change, and we will change for the better. So we'll leave it at that. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, after what seemed where it is one of the more atrocious events, now we got something that's extremely exciting. Yash Talawkar is officially admitted into Iowa University. Come on, let's go. Give a
Yeah.
hand.
George Kittle's University,
George Kittle is from there. We got a bunch of great tight ends
Caitlin
from there.
Clark.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's amazing, man. That's amazing. Congratulations on that, Yash. Now we're going to swiftly move on to another exciting topic. That's the mock draft of the NFL. I think this was one of the more exciting drafts. Not well, okay. I'm gonna start off by saying this. I'm not a big fan of this draft because I'm a fan of defense, and this is just one of the more weak defensive drafts that I've seen in a long time. Um, the offensive side is just blowing out of the water. I mean, you have extremely talented receivers. Quarterbacks are very talented, frankly. Um, offensive linemen. That's the one thing I'm excited about this draft. The offensive linemen here are this is probably I'm gonna say this is the most talented offensive line class that I've ever seen entering an NFL draft in the well, it's not very no, it doesn't really matter because I've only seen it for 5 years, but it's the most talented offensive line
Well, take
draft.
it from me. I've been watching the league for 12 years. This is the most talented offensive line class I've seen. So
Yeah, so this is well, that's much more credible than me. But this is without a doubt an offensive juggernaut class. So I'm just gonna get it started off here. Um,
So, Akhilesh, before we start off, would
okay.
you mind sharing? So, as we do the
Uh,
mock draft, would you mind giving me share screen permissions?
yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Why do you sound so official, man? Just say give me some sharing rights. I'll do that.
I do that more and more
No, no,
nowadays.
no. You sound like a lawyer. Will you please give me the rights to share my screen, sir? Like,
Absolutely.
chill, dude. Acting like you're a man of good. You're in the crown or something. You know when the king goes and or the queen goes in front of everybody, she's like, "Your Majesty," or someone goes to the queen,
Yeah,
like, "Your
yeah, yeah.
Majesty."
Well, I
Like,
mean, okay.
like
To be fair,
you're acting
we've
official.
been reading Hamlet in English, so I'm getting more used to like
Oh, there's nothing
speaking
official
English.
about that. That's all crazy stuff. That man is bonkers. Oh
Thanks
my
cheers,
God,
thanks
Hamlet
cheers.
is a ding dong in all measures. I mean, that guy is on something. I don't know if they had all the stuff that alcohol to that level that we have now, but he was on something, dude.
Hey, well, we're gonna start off with So what we're
Mr.
gonna start
Benedict,
off
I'm
with
just
is
saying this. I
flipping a
didn't sleep
coin.
off in class. I listened in class. Mr. Benedict, if you're watching this, I listened in class. Hamlet is crazy. And I'll say one thing that you'll be really, really proud of. He always mixes his words.
Absolutely. So we're
See, I
gonna
told
start
you.
off
I
by
listen.
flipping a coin as far as who gets to
Oh,
start, alternate,
professional.
and who
Okay.
gets to start off first. Akhilesh, would you pick heads or tails?
Tails. Let's go tails.
Tails. All right, here we go. And the call is tails. Would you like to start off first, or would you like to defer?
Um, I think you can start off. I'm gonna
All
give you the
right.
rights here. I'm
So,
gonna do what the 49ers should have done.
so as we start off, we go with the number one pick, and we have these trades as we're using NFL Mock Draft Simulator by Pro Football
Ooh.
Network. Um,
Okay.
I'm gonna start off. I'm conflicted with the whole Caleb Williams versus Justin Fields thing. I'm of the
Yeah.
opinion that the Bears should stick with Justin Fields, but I do think that they're going to go Caleb Williams right now, given the current circumstances, who they hired as their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron,
Hmm.
who has experience with quarterbacks who like to throw the ball deep, extremely aggressive. I think Williams has a little bit better arm than Caleb Williams. Uh,
Yeah.
and so for that reason, I'm going to take Caleb Williams, who I think is the best player in the draft. I know, Akilesh, you have a few disagreements on that when we will break that down soon.
Hmm.
Caleb Williams is certainly the consensus for the number one pick. So I think the Bears
Definitely.
are going to go take him and not pass up the opportunity of what he can give.
I think, personally to me, I think my gut feeling is they are going to stick with Justin Fields because I think Justin Fields has an arm that just hasn't opened up yet. You've
Mm,
said Caleb Williams has a better arm. I think I think that statement can be made really based off his college film. In the NFL, we haven't seen him being allowed to use that bomb of his.
for sure.
So I'm not I think they will stick around here, but what I will say about Caleb Williams is this: I think his talent is above anything that I've seen in a long time from a college perspective. I just don't see the grit, the fight from him. That was my consensus about him. That's why I just don't think. I told Yashi he was going to be a bust on a chat,
Yeah.
and I'm frankly honest. Um, I still have that gut feeling. There's no statistical, no film reason to say that at all. It's just a gut feeling to me. Um, I disagree on the fact that they will go with Caleb Williams. I'm not mad at it, but that's my standpoint. Well, the second pick, though, for Washington, I think to me it's pretty clear for Washington. Looking at Cliff Kingsbury, who's just become the offensive coordinator there. Um, I'm just going to propose two things. In the case that the Bears don't draft Caleb Williams, it's an obvious Caleb Williams for the
Absolutely.
Washington football team. But with the Commanders, I think they will go with Drake May. This guy's extremely talented. He has a great arm in all respects. He's great with his feet. Can really see the ball in the deep field. Um, he's not the greatest when it comes to playing against. I've seen this in film at least when I was studying defensive players. You look at guys who are more of when they play a three inside box or sometimes a five-man outside rush. He's not the greatest when it comes to quick recognition, quick passing on the play, which is something he's going to get used to, has to get used to rather in the NFL. But I think over time, with the talent that he has with McLaren and all the receivers that they've gotten in the past, I think it's something he can develop over time. So Washington Commanders, I think that they're going to take Drake May.
All right. For number three, and before we start, I'm gonna go to let you know, Akilesh, that you're gonna pick number 4 and 5, just because I'm interested in what you want to do with the Chargers pick.
Okay.
Obviously, I feel like that's your
Yeah,
ground to really talk about.
appreciate it.
But at number three, Patriots, it's pretty obvious that they're probably going to move away from Mac Jones, or at the very least make a change at the quarterback position, and probably have a different signal callers come September. Um, I do think that now that Bill Belichick's gone, they're probably going to have a different style of quarterback, which opens the door for a guy like Jaden Daniels, who's going to be
Mhm.
the pick here. Um, I have questions on whether his style of play, especially certain parts of his
Yeah.
game, will translate to the NFL level. But I do think that people criticize him a little too much as far as his passing ability. He's certainly a lot better of a passer than people think, and you're going to see that a lot more at the different combine, his pro day, definitely a lot of that stuff. You see it on film, and he with the new coaching staff that Gerard Mayo has put there. I think Jaden Daniels, they might be able to get the best out of him, and we'll see what that really is. But I have him at number three.
Yeah. First of all, I think that Gene Daniels to me he has the second best arm in the NFL draft right now.
Oh, damn.
Um,
Okay.
I don't think anybody other than Caleb Williams beats him. I mean, this guy. You look at the
Wow.
competition that he has to face this year. He had to face. I mean, you look at FSU. He had to face Alabama, if I'm not wrong. He
Correct.
had tough competition throughout the season, and he put on a show every single time he went out there. Really,
When
he
you're
did.
talking about arm, are you talking about like arm talent, or are you talking about just like passing game overall?
Arm passing game overall.
Okay,
I
okay,
think
okay, okay. So, okay, I misunderstood what you're saying, but go ahead.
Okay. I think his deep ball accuracy is. Some people question it. I think it's great. I really do think it's great.
For sure.
He can see the field very well. The only thing I would think about when it comes to the Patriots is considering who Alex Van Pelt is. He's coming from a Cleveland Browns organization.
Mhm.
Is the style of Jaden Daniels gonna forget the NFL, but gonna fit his scheme?
Right.
That's where I kind of think about it. With number four, you've put me in. To pick number five as well. With number four, I'm gonna take the obvious pick, which is Marvin Harrison Jr. This guy is the number one. He's the best player in this draft, without a doubt. I mean, you look at what he can do. As a receiver, he can play in any system, any day, all day, every day. Those were some quick, any day, all day. Okay.
I got it. I
He's
got
a yeah, I know. Man, I wish I didn't explain. Okay, he's a great player, all respects. See the field great first of all. The release, the get off. I mean, he really reminds me of his dad and Devonte Adams in the way that he can kind of position his feet exactly right to move into those right lanes, understanding what the corner is playing. Um, if you we'll talk about this more in the football 101s as we go on. But a corner when he plays inside shade, outside shade, when the moment receiver sees that his route changes, the progression of his route changes. So he's a great player overall. Number five. Number five is this Chargers pick. I am really, really, really. There's like three thoughts, multiple thoughts that run in my head. Number one, I think they stay in the same place and then they pick somebody. In my mind, if they stay in the same place, they're going to go for two people mainly. Or they trade back to number eight and then acquire another first round pick through that, which may work, may not work. I don't know. Um, or those are the two main thoughts that are running in my head. But my gut feeling right now is they stay in the same place, and I think what they're gonna do is they're gonna go ahead and then I think they're with the fifth pick, controversial because you never want to select. So this is why I'm actually so shaky about this. Um, to me, it's for me. I think they stay, but who they pick when they're staying is what I'm unsure about. If they stay, I think they're gonna pick either Brock Bowers or they're gonna pick Joe Alt. Um, look, Jim Harbaugh is very clear on his system of he wants to solidify as a run game type team. Wants to be a very grit, in the trenches type coach, and I think that's the way it should be. However, I'm just thinking from a standpoint of is drafting a tight end at number five super high.
Right.
However, I think in this case they will draft Brock Bowers. In the case that I think offensive line talent, as far as I've seen, has never been the worst when it comes to positions. Um, this is a very talented class without a doubt, but I think that in the second round they can sneak some people in. So with that, I'm gonna go with Brock Bowers as the tight end from Georgia. He's a great block setter, great in the pass game as well. I think we sell off Gerald Everett and keep him in that number one spot to play the blocking tight end that we've always needed. So
It's
Brock
going to be
Bowers at number
interesting
five.
what the Chargers do for certain.
Yeah.
They have a lot of different holes, and they're going
There's
to
no bad picks, honestly. At number five, who would they pick? You know,
absolutely. I mean,
from
Joel
reasonable
is one of the.
standpoint.
Go ahead.
I think Joel to number one. He's the best offensive lineman coming out of this draft. He's the best offensive lineman I've seen. I would argue since Quentin Nelson that I've actually seen out of an offensive lineman. You look at that talent, the size, the speed, the hands. I've never seen. Not I've never seen, but I haven't seen a talent from a tackle perspective that I'm seeing from Joe Alt, other than Quentin Nelson at the guard.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna go back to 6 and 7, and I'm gonna be very frank about this. I'm gonna actually trade pick 7. I'm gonna trade to the Falcons, um,
Smart,
because
smart,
this trade
smart.
because this trade system kind of works a little weird. Bear with me here. I will say what the Falcons and the Giants trade, but we won't be necessarily be able to efficiently run this, because sometimes this trade machine acts weird. But what I am going to do is say that if the Falcons do trade up to pick with the Giants, I would assume that they pick trade away picks number 74 and 114. Usually, when you have two picks in the same draft, you want to give away one of
Mhm.
those. That's
Yeah,
why the Bills were able to trade up to get Josh Allen in spite of not giving up a first round pick.
yeah,
And of course, you probably are going to give away your third round pick. I would assume that the Falcons also probably give out a second or third, just given where this draft is. Um,
sure.
but at the current moment, of course, we're going to just go with this trade. The Falcons are going to trade up to number 6, and I think that they're going to pick their quarterback of the future. Um, as to who it is, I'm going to go a little bit off here, but I'm going to pick Bo Nix, believe it or not. I think Bo Nix is going to get a lot more draft coverage as the season goes on. He did really well coming out.
Whoa.
He is extremely, extremely, extremely underrated as far as his athleticism. He's very sound with his accuracy, and he's a very, very good fit with the Atlanta Falcons. I think this is going to be a player that a lot more teams are going to look at his film, what his career trajectory has been like, and I think this is going to lead to Bo Nix soaring up the boards. The
Wow.
Falcons need a quarterback, and they're not going to waste time as far as getting up to number 6 to ensure that they can get that quarterback, knowing that they can't get one of the top 3 guys. But Bo Nix certainly is very, very talented. I'm extremely high on him. Um, and I think he's going to be the Falcons pick. At number 7, I'm going to go with a tackle here, and I'm going to go with Joe Alt. Like you said, he is the most talented, most athletic tackle I've probably ever seen since Trent Williams came out, since Tyrone Smith came out. I need to do a little bit more breakdown of his technique before I can really make a statement about him. But he is certainly a freak of nature, being 6'8", and running like that. You don't see that often. The Titans need a tackle. I just don't really see them going for a wide receiver here. So that's why I think the Giants can afford to
Yeah.
trade back. Given Brian Callahan, I would assume he's probably going to go after T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd in free agency. But Joel is something they need, and they need a tackle who can really be a fortitude for whoever their future quarterback is, whether that's Will Levis or someone else down the line. And Joel will definitely be that guy. As far as number 8, you take it away, Akilesh.
Number eight. Look, I think number eight, what the Giants need is a receiver. I think that they are lacking in that receiver class when you look
Correct.
at it, and I think to me, Rome. I don't know how to say his name, but Rome
Roma
Odunzu.
Dunze.
Udunze.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know how to pronounce his name. I think he's the second best receiver in this draft. He has great speed, great intangibles. Hands are great. One thing he does lack though is maybe his sense of awareness. One thing that obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. had on lock was to able to identify the defense and change his route or progression based on that. There were a couple of situations against Michigan that I thought that coverage, that zone coverage, had many open spots that Romeo Odunze could have exposed based on the progression of his route, but he kind of stuck to what was given. That kind of caused him at the end. But fantastic player in all measures. Fantastic player.
So you're gonna go Roma Dunze. All right. So
Yeah.
that's one that kind of threw me off, given the fact that I thought he would be a perfect fit for the Bears, given what their offseason looks like.
Yeah.
Darnell Mooney is a free agency. I don't know if he's gonna come back necessarily. He'd be a
But I mean,
he'd
we
be a
do have to consider the fact that they do have DJ Moore, right?
That is true.
Who's
Absolutely.
fantastic
But for
receiver.
that reason, I'm not good. For me personally, I think a lot of teams are going to pick up on this too. Malik Neighbors comparative to Odunze and Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't think has as good measurables. I think
No,
I question
I
his
think he's
ceiling too.
extremely overrated. He's
I
extremely
agree with
overrated.
you. I don't know extremely, but he's certainly a little bit overrated,
To
and
the
he's
extent that he is talked about, he's extremely overrated. I'll
fair
put
enough.
it as that. Maybe.
But what I will say is I think that he might fall a little bit in this draft, and I question his ceiling a little bit. For that
Yeah.
reason, I think that the Bears might trade down and wait to see what they can get
Ooh,
a little
okay.
bit. And I'm gonna go with actually a trade. The Broncos and the Raiders are both down here. I'm gonna go
Okay.
with the Broncos, given that they have the higher pick. I think that would be something that's a lot more attractive to the Bears. I think they have a
Mm-hmm.
lot more picks in general too. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, so I think the Bears would be appealed by that a lot more. Um, so for me, what I'll say for the trade is I think the Broncos are pretty much gonna give up their first next three picks after pick 12, and they're probably
Yeah.
gonna give up a fourth rounder or sixth rounder next year, whether that's an
Mm-hmm.
early sixth rounder or their own fourth rounder.
Okay.
That's to be questioned. That's more about what the Bears want, but I think the Bears are going to be accumulating a lot of picks in this draft, whether that's from the number one pick or
Yeah.
whether that's from the number nine pick.
They've been doing that for quite a while now. I mean, next year they have
Absolutely.
two second round picks. I think people forget that. So they are very good at that overall.
Yes, and I think this is a perfect fit for the Broncos to pick their quarterback of the future, given the fact that they're probably going to move away from Russell Wilson. I think the perfect fit for them is none other than JJ McCarthy. He's perfect for what Sean Payton likes to do, kind of run around the outside, settle, throw deep. He's done that a lot in Michigan. He's a little bit raw, so he's going to take some time to develop. But Sean Payton loves these types of quarterbacks. He's worked with guys like that. A guy like Drew Brees did this had the same style of play. I think McCarthy, where he kind of like run around the outside, settle, and throw the ball. I'm not comparing Drew Brees' accuracy or McCarthy's arm or whatever, but however, I do think that it would be a perfect fit for what Sean Payton likes in his system. I think he wants a new quarterback. That has been for sure stated a lot of times, and I think for that reason, he's going to pick JJ McCarthy.
Not really. I
Um, I'm surprised that first of all, two names, Michael Penix Jr. and Jordan Travis. I'm surprised that they're not off the board yet. I think these two are extremely like I really don't understand what the I haven't look. I don't like quarterbacks, so I usually don't try to look at them as much. But I don't really understand what the problem is. If you look at Jordan Travis before his injury, he's playing as a top three quarterback.
You're
He,
correct.
he's insane the way he played with FSU. And FSU, by any means, they were lucky because Jordan Travis was there. Because Michael Penix, he led a 13-0 in charge. And let's be honest, Michigan won because of the run game, not because JJ McCarthy was an all-star quarterback out there, right?
I just don't
So
feel like he's the best system fit. And I think Penix will go in the first round. I don't know about Travis because he has not been high on draft boards in general,
yeah,
but uh,
um,
it's just about a system fit. I think McCarthy
see,
for sure.
I think personally to me, I'm interested with the quarterback pick, but with the Broncos, I think I would go on Terry Arnold. Look at what he has like. I'm not saying he's one of the greater defensive backs to ever come, but I think what you can see from him is he can play really that nickel, that star position that Brandon Staley talked about a lot. In terms of a position play, that would really help them. But I'm not mad at the pick. I'm just not as happy with the decision made in terms of the position. Number 10 with the Jets, the infamous Jets when it comes to the offensive line, they need to protect Mr. One play, pass play, I'm gonna get down on my knees and be out the entire season, Mr. Aaron Rodgers. They really need to protect him at this point because he ain't got much life left. With my 10th pick, I think I'm gonna go ahead and I think he's the number one tackle, not number one tackle, my mistake. I think he's one of the better uh top three easily. Again, another name I can't say. Olumuyiwa
Olumuyiwa Fashanu, or we just call him Olu Fashanu here.
Olufashanu? Okay.
Yeah.
Olufashanu. On my notebook, I just have the entire name, so I don't know how to pronounce it. But look, this guy, he's one thing about him that separates him from everybody else is his feet. I think that the feet are frankly very good. He has great spacing between the feet every single time. He's not pressured exactly. One thing he's susceptible though is sometimes the bull rush factor. It does get him because when he gets stunned a little bit, he doesn't know how to operate on the end. But other than that, fantastic tackle. I think that the Jets take him reinforce that offensive line that they've had a problem with for such a long time.
All right, at number 11, this is an interesting one, just given where they are. The Vikings. I think at pick 11, you have the opportunity to take Michael Penix, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Um, as much as I think they're going
Dude,
to stick
you're
with Kirk Cousins,
crazy. You're
as much as I
crazy.
think they're going to stick with Kirk Cousins, I do. You at this point, given the Achilles injury that he had, given the age that he's at, you're probably looking at him as a quarterback, kind of like Ryan Tannehill, who was a very good quarterback. But at some point, you have to take his age in consideration. Michael Penix is a very, very good fit for this team.
That's
And
true.
again, this is a
That's true.
quarterback heavy draft. So you're going to see a
Yeah.
lot of quarterbacks go early given the demand for quarterbacks. I think
Okay.
Minnesota takes their quarterback of the future, and I think Penix is a perfect fit for them as far as his deep ball ability.
Okay.
Watching him and Justin Jefferson is going to be really fun to watch.
That's true. That's true. Um, with the Bears now, the Bears, one thing that they've lacked is an interior identity. I think that's one thing that's been mentioned for a long time. I think what they're going to do here is they're going to go with Byron Murphy the second, out of Texas. I think this guy is one of the more
Wow.
talented defensive tackles that I've seen um, in this draft at least. Great men's size, can have a lot of pressure in the up front. They have great edges on the outside too when you look at them. Actually, you know what? Hold up. No, no, I just forgot something. No, sorry. Reverse that. Reverse that. Not Byron Murphy. I completely forgot. Dallas Turner. I thought he was already drafted. My mistake, guys. I'm sorry. If
Okay,
you
so what we'll
let
do just for time's sake,
if you wanted to
I
pick, my
no,
bad, guys.
I will no, I will. What I will do is whenever I pick Byron Murphy or you pick Byron Murphy, just basically I'll draft
Yeah.
Dallas Turner for you.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry, guys. My bad. My bad on that. That's my mistake. I forgot. I thought because at this point I thought Dallas Turner was selected because in the mock drafts it was the Falcons taking Dallas Turner. That's what I saw all the time. I'm very sorry about that. Um, Dallas Turner is the number one defensive prospect coming out of this draft. He has great. He's extremely good actually when it comes to similar to Lawrence Taylor in the fact that he can drop into pass coverage and attack the quarterback, and the quarterback just doesn't know when it's coming. Pretty good hands, honestly. He has good size for being that fast as he is off the ball. So I think they actually go with an edge rusher to solidify on the either side of that front. I can't believe I missed that. Okay, Dallas Turner is going to be my pick for the Broncos.
in the case of the Raiders, it's a matter of best pick available. They have a lot of positions that they can really need help. Like I said, Antonio Pierce did a really good job with this team, but this is one of the worst teams on paper in the NFL,
I would
especially
argue the
on the
worst,
defensive
honestly.
end. So I think they need someone to help on the defensive side. And for me, the best player defensively on the draft board is Terrion Arnold. Whether you think that he's going to be like this generational cornerback talent, which I've heard from some analysts, or you think he's going to be, to me, he's the best cornerback in the draft, the most versatile, and the Raiders need everything on the secondary. So from that standpoint, I think Arnold would be a perfect fit for them. He's also pretty aggressive, pretty physical. Fits the Raiders' identity. It to me would be a perfect Al Davis pick if he was still here. Rest in peace.
Yeah, I think I agree with the fact that this Terrion Arnold is definitely one of the more talented defensive backs coming out. Although I'm not very high on this cornerback class at all, if I'm being very honest. I think Terrion Arnold, if you put him on an island, he's not going to be as successful as if you put him on the inside star or nickel positions. That's my personal opinion from what I've seen, as he plays. With the 14th pick for the Saints, a very interesting pick. They could go ahead and try to solidify their offensive line, with the talent that it's there right now. Or what they could do is solidify the defense, which is a very emerging defense, or they pick up their quarterback of the future. I'm gonna go ahead and say they pick up Jordan Travis out of
Wow.
FSU to go ahead and take this team on his back and go out there and put on a show. I think that's what they. I mean, you look at the Saints; they've lacked that identity at quarterback. Derek Carr, as great as he is not the talent that's needed there right now. He is aging, and I think it's time for him to
Sure.
become a mentorship role for another quarterback coming in.
So you
Jordan
think Jordan
Travis,
Travis is going to jump up draft boards? That is a very, very bold pick, but
he
I
is
like it.
not a second round pick by any
Absolutely,
means.
I
This man
agree
is
with
not
you. But
deserving of that.
I mean, based on what I've seen on on certain people's mock drafts, I mean, I don't know if
Yeah,
he will get in the first round, but
yeah,
whatever
I know.
team picks him,
I'm
it will be
shocked.
a
I'm
steal.
shocked. Yeah,
Certainly.
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
As far
Except
as
the
the
Patriots.
Indianapolis, go ahead.
No, I said except the Patriots. For everybody
Yeah,
else is a steal because we you guys know what we do out of quarterbacks.
absolutely. As far as the Indianapolis Colts go, I think to me, it they're a very mercurial team. I think they're one of the teams that I think just can go best player available because they don't really have a bad position, but they don't really have a good position. To me, the weakest position, however, and the position that has one of the better defensive players at their need is cornerback. So I'm gonna go Kool-Aid McKinstry. Um, I don't know. I
Okay.
question the fit a little bit at times, but they're good at basically being able to switch between man and zone. And Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think, is a better in zone coverage. I think he'd be able to learn under a guy like Kenny Moore how to basically cover within the nickel, which he is not necessarily that's not his best fit. At the boundary, however, if you put him next to Kenny Moore, that is going to be a hell of a combo. And I think the Colts could really take that next step defensively.
Okay. With the pick for the Seattle Seahawks, I think that what they're going to do is they have a very talented defense, without a doubt. You look at the cornerbacks that they've acquired over the past few years; they're a very talented defense. So what I'm going to say is they go with on an offensive side, and I think they're going to take J.C. Latham.
JC
Very
Latham.
talented offensive tackle to protect what they have already. In terms of protecting Geno Smith, the wide receivers that they have, which is a pretty good wide receiver class. Don't get me wrong, but I think they're going to get another offensive lineman to enforce that line.
Okay, it's a very interesting pick for sure. At this point, the Jacksonville Jaguars is number 17. I've been thinking about Malik Neighbors still being on the board. I don't think that he would I don't think he'd last this long, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are here based on the way our draft board has landed. I don't think the team that I think will trade up for him will be able to, given that they are a divisional rival. Um, However, at number 17, the Jacksonville Jaguars have an emerging defense. I think they want to capitalize off of that. At the same time, their offensive line has some question marks. And I think given how deep this offensive line draft is, they don't want to miss a chance at that offensive line position. I question whether they can be able to get one of the more talented offensive linemen later on, the guys that they want. So to me, I'm going to go with the guy I think is one of the more versatile offensive line, fills in every hole they need. That's going to be Tylee
Yeah.
Spraga, if I'm pronouncing his name right, from Oregon State. This guy can play all over the field. He's a prototypical Trent Baalke type pick on the offensive line. Reminds me a lot of a guy like Mike Upati. And he's very, very nasty within that run game. He'll definitely be able to help someone like Travis Etienne continue to get better in both the run and the receiving game.
With the Cincinnati Bengals, this is a very interesting pick to say the least. With the Cincinnati Bengals, they could either boast their offensive line, or what they could do is they could get a wide receiver. Honestly, coming out of this, in case T Higgins goes, which is a possibility, considering the draft right now. So with the 18th pick, I think the Cincinnati Bengals go ahead and bolster their offensive line. I think they go ahead and then they take out of Georgia Amarius Mims, talented offensive tackle. To say the least, I haven't had too much film on him, but I think based on who is there, I think he's the person to go.
Awesome. At number 19, we got the Los Angeles Rams, who need a lot of help in different areas. They are going to be they need to basically be helped at certain positions where they're just terrible. They're either really, really good or really, really trash. So to me, I think they're going to go at one of the positions that is extremely deep. Once again, I think they're also going to go an offensive line. And for me, that's going to be the guy out of BYU, Kingsley, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Suamatia. This is a really, 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 really big guy. And he fits the mold of guys like Andrew Whitworth, maybe not as athletic, but certainly as nasty as him. And the Rams need that signature tackle that can basically start off. He's great as far as a day one position filler. For that reason, I think the Rams, if they will really want to continue forward, Kingsley Suamatia, if I'm pronouncing that right again, that's their guy.
Um, with the Steelers, if you look at the Steelers, I mean, this is they're often they have a new offensive coordinator. I don't really know his system. It's a very confusing system in my mind. There's no particular way he that their offense is really going to look right now. Especially the way Najee Harris has been playing since he's been out of college. It's a very average play in my eyes. I think they're gonna go ahead and I think they're gonna take a guy who has speed. I know this guy is not probably above what other people are saying, but I think they're going to take Quinion Mitchell of Toledo. This guy
Wow.
has great
Okay.
speed, great intangibles, great hands on the ball. He's not the tallest corner out there, but he's definitely, I think he's one of the more talented corners. If you look at physical, fast, quick, off the ball, maybe not the best when it comes to coverage, but I think he's definitely, I think he's a Steeler pick.
For the Miami Dolphins, they have a few needs. I feel like their third receiver outside of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, it could be a question. Tyreek Hill might retire after next year. He's talked about that before. Their offensive line has a few question marks. Their defense seems fine talent wise, but we'll see about the new scheme that they've put in. However, given where they are, given the guys that are still here, I think they can't pass on a guy as versatile as Fatanu from Washington. Another guy who can play across the board. To me, he's the best guard in the draft from what I've seen so far. Um, he is extremely athletic, extremely instinctive, gets his hands on the guy better than anybody I've seen. And you pair him alongside a guy like Robert Hunt. Maybe you could play him at center, but Connor Williams has done well on that side. And you have Liam Eichenberg, Austin Jackson, and Taron Armstead on either side. I mean, that is that at that point, Tua Tagovailoa is going to have a lot more daylight to throw to guys like Hill, to throw to guys like Jalen Waddle deep down the field.
Number 22, with Jason Kelsey retiring, obviously, one thing they could do is they can put in I forget his name, Landon Dickerson, if I'm not wrong, coming out of
Yeah.
Alabama 2 years ago at center. He did play center for Nick Saban at Alabama, if I'm not wrong. Or they could go with what I think is the correct here, and then go with Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. I think he's the best center in this entire class. Extremely talented, smart, physical. I think he's going to bring a lot of grit to this Eagles offensive line, which is its identity.
So for number 23, the guy that has fallen way down the draft, of course, is Malik Neighbors. The team that I thought that was going to pick him was the Houston Texans, who I think would love to have a third receiver to help CJ Stroud continue to develop, alongside guys like Tank Dell and Nico Collins, who are 1,000-yard receivers. Malik Neighbors certainly might not have the same upside as a guy like Malik Harrison or sorry, Marvin Harrison Jr. or a guy like Roma Dunze, but he is a move the chains type receiver, and he's very, very, very good at that. So for me, Malik Neighbors is pick number 23. Um, Definitely going to get you a lot of touchdowns, and he'll definitely help Houston continue to take that next step forward.
Yeah. Number 24. I mean, I think it is clear that the offensive line, it's a very old offensive line at this point. It needs some restructuring. I think they're going to take Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. This guy is a very talented prospect. I think his talent hasn't been utilized to the best of his ability. But I think this guy is top tier in all regards. I mean, you look at his hands, the way he moves, everything. I think he's definitely a top tackle coming out of this class.
So you and I have debated on this next pick that I'm going to do a lot. A guy that you think is probably going to be drafted in the second round, but I do think he's the only safety that is worth a value here at this area, and that is Cameron Kitchens, who to me currently, from what I've seen, is the best safety in the draft, or at least the best strong safety. And the Packers really need a strong safety with Darnell Savage leaving. Jonathan Owens is probably not going to start next year. We'll see. He's anyways more of a platoon player. Cameron Kitchens is the guy they need, and he would be playing that Ronnie Lott type role. And I'm not saying he's Ronnie Lott, of course, but he would definitely be that enforcer in the right side of that backfield in the secondary for the Packers, and it helped them as far as continuing to make their defense better and better and more talented.
Yeah, I'm actually going to disagree with you here. I don't think he's the best safety in this entire draft. I think Tyler Nubin is the best safety coming out of Minnesota. I think he is
I
more
haven't
Ronnie
seen
Lott,
film on
more
him, so yeah.
physical. He's more physical. He's quicker on his feet. Maybe not the best at recognition, but I think he's by an athletic standpoint far beyond any other defensive back in this class. I will argue with that. Um, Now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think it's a very interesting pick, to say the least, for them. But considering what has happened now, I think when we look at it, I mean, this team has been known for a tough, solid defensive team. You look at what Todd Bowles wants to accomplish there, and I think with this draft, they go ahead and they get Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. Extremely talented guy. I think he's the best run-stopping defensive back in this entire draft. He's extremely physical, easily the most physical cornerback in this entire draft. He's to me, I think he's the closest you're gonna get to a John Lynch type player.
He'd be the first white defensive back or the first white cornerback since 2003, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Certainly something to remember when he gets drafted. Number 27, the guy that you missed out on, Dallas Turner, was supposed to be with Chicago. I'm going to go with Byron Murphy. I do think that it's a best player available, and I do think Murphy is the best player available at this specific position. The Cardinals need everything around their defense, and Murphy is a perfect Jonathan Gannon type player. Reminds me a lot of Milton Williams when he came out of Louisiana Tech a couple years ago for Philadelphia. Plays that three technique better than most defensive tackles I've seen in this draft. So yeah, I'm going to go with Byron Murphy, and of course, it's going to show Dallas Turner because of what happened earlier. But yes, it is Byron Murphy.
I think the Buffalo Bills with this next pick, and I'm surprised this guy has not been picked yet. I'm gonna go with Laitu Latu. I
Wow.
think
Okay.
this guy, without a doubt, is to me, I think he's the second best defensive lineman or defensive player in this draft. I don't see any other guy who has as much size, as much speed, as much athleticism, leverage as this guy has. He's extremely talented. I really like this guy.
As far as number 29, the Lions have a lot of places that they can improve on as they continue to get better and better. To me, though, I do think that they need a receiver to pair alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown if they really want to take that next step, especially against a team as dominant as the Niners were with the secondary really corralling the Lions. We saw drops being a problem for the Lions again in the NFC Championship game. For that reason, I'm going to go with the guy who I think at this current moment has the best hands any player remaining, and that's Adonai Mitchell. He was spectacular against Washington. Has incredible ability to hop, like incredible hops. You're going to see a lot more of him at the combine. He's going to impress a lot of people, turn heads, and his draft stock is going to increase a lot more.
Yash, if you don't mind, I'll round out with the last three picks here. Um,
Sure.
with the Baltimore Ravens, I think they go with Keon Coleman, from FSU. Extremely talented wide receiver. Obviously played with Jordan Travis. Again, I think he's the second best receiver, actually, a third best receiver in this class, arguably. Um, Now, coming with the 49ers, I think they go to boost their offensive line that had so many troubles. They go with Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. Again, very talented guy. Has his flaws, but again, can be definitely fixed. 32, I think now the Chiefs are going to have the best defensive line in the league. 3 years from now, they go with Jerzon Newton out of Illinois, the
Wow.
second best defensive tackle in this entire draft, without a doubt. Um, and so that's our pick, guys. You guys let us know what you think about it. Um,
Yeah, so Akilesh, that was some crazy mock draft. The last three picks, very interesting. Keon Coleman, I'm in agreement with that. It wasn't the pick I would have picked, but I certainly get why you came from that. Jordan Morgan, I don't know if that would be the tackle I would have picked, but definitely
hmm.
understand the pick. Um, the 49ers might need a tackle after Trent Williams retires. He's 36 years old, also on the right side. They kind of need a tackle. And then the Chiefs, you went with Jerzon Newton. That was an interesting one. Jerzon Newton being one of my favorite prospects in this draft. You're going to hear me talk a lot about him. Um,
Coming
but
from my dad's alma mater, by the way.
oh,
Just
really? Word.
yeah,
Did
just
not
give me
know
an
that.
out, Illinois.
But
Yeah,
no, I mean he is really good, and to add him to that defense is a scary, scary thought. But interesting to know because I mean I feel like the Chiefs have a few other needs, but that would be a really, really good move for sure.
yeah.
Either way, we're going to be moving on to as we're talking about the Super Bowl a lot in this episode. We're going to be kind of discussing a topic that is a little bit debatable for both of us, and I think it will be for
I think very much debatable. I think saying a little debatable is an understatement. I think very much
absolutely.
debatable.
But we're going to be talking about the top 10 Super Bowls. And like we did with our quarterback and our all our positional rankings earlier in the year, we're going to be kind of doing a back and forth draft where Akilesh and I will be basically picking back and forth who, what we're number one or number three or number five, respectively, pick for the Super Bowl is. And then we'll go from there. Akilesh, once again, I ask heads or tails?
Let's go heads this time.
All right. I'd make a joke, but it's inappropriate for the children
Oh,
watching.
come on, Yash. Come on.
And it was tails.
It was
So,
tails.
yeah.
Missed it again.
So I will choose to yeah, I will choose to defer actually because I think both you and I might have the same number one pick, and I want to kind of yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on it. So go
You
ahead.
want me to you want me to go first at number 10 or 1?
Number one.
The greatest Super Bowl of all time. So we're going backwards now.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one I thought about, right? But at this point I think it's obvious. It's got to be the Patriots versus the Falcons in 2017. It has to
Agreed.
be. That is the greatest Super Bowl of all time. I mean, you talk about 20, you're down 28-3 in the third quarter with what, 3 minutes left or some astronomical number like that. Bill Belichick comes in and he says, we're gonna knock this game out. Tom Brady comes in, throws for 400 plus yards, over 50 passing attempts, and
60.
James White out of
Over
or
60.
60
Yeah.
passing attempts rather. Um, James White comes out of nowhere from Georgia, comes in, and he has a monster game on a receiving end for a running back. The catch by Julian Edelman, where he gets knocked down and he still holds the ball into his hands. I mean, it's do your job. At the end of the day, Bill Belichick came in and he said, "Look, we're down 28-3 in the Super Bowl against a daunted Falcons defense led by now Commanders head coach Dan Quinn." Um, I mean, it was a nasty defense. People forget how good and quite honestly, to an extent, dangerous that defense was. And then you look at the Patriots, who were really throughout the game. If you look at the first half, they were just manhandled. I've never said that about a Patriots team on any day, except last few years. But with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, they've never been manhandled the way they were in that first half. I mean, the pick six by Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. Um, it's actually kind of interesting. There's a video called "Do Your Job 2016," where there's a series constructed by NFL Films where they go over each time Bill Belichick won a Super Bowl. They made a kind of a documentary. That's how good this guy was, right? So they had a documentary where, if I'm not wrong, the Vikings defensive coordinator now, um, forget his name. Uh, I should know his name. Vikings DC.
Currently, no. My defense coordinator,
Yeah.
Bud Grant.
No, 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 no. The Vikings. DC defensive coordinator. I'll just search it up, guys.
Oh,
I'm
Brian
sorry.
Flores. Brian Flores. I'm
Yeah,
tripping.
there we go. Yeah, Brian Flores, who was at that time a assistant for the New England Patriots. He said he had a funny story where Bill Belichick was in the locker room. He looked at Tom Brady before going there. He said, "Tom, we've never scored a point in the first quarter. Can we get that done today?" Flores was like, "We're gonna get 40 points in the first quarter. I mean, we're just gonna go crazy. What happens? They get down 28-3. But that's just what it is. I mean, Tom Brady showing he's the GOAT, not Patrick Mahomes. He came in and he said, I'm gonna dominate this game. They changed their entire system. And like every single one of those things that team did was calculated to like the minutest detail. Robert Kraft said in that ceremony where they gave the rings, there was a 99.6% chance that the Falcons would come out of there winning. And Tom Brady did his magic again. I mean, that has to be the number one Super Bowl.
For
I
sure.
just don't know if you could give anything else that level of insanity.
For sure. And I mean, we talk about just the magical idea of what a Super Bowl brings us. Just kind of like I mean, there was so much new about that Super Bowl that was just different. I mean, you talk about just kind of the pregame context of it. I mean, it was a pop culture masterclass. And we don't really talk politics on this level, but at the time, of course, we knew about, there was a huge there was a huge uprising to talk about where former President Donald Trump got elected, and there was this whole thing about the Patriots who kind of like supported him. Donald Trump wanted to own the Patriots a long time and how the dynasty kind of got built. There was a lot of history of a lot behind that. And the Falcons came from this, like this kind of cool, like, what's the word? Like, they had a lot of support from the inner city Atlanta fan base. And at the time, the biggest rap group, if I'm not mistaken, was Migos, which was like they were huge Atlanta Falcons fans based out of Atlanta.
Mhm.
You had guys like Ludacris, etc. So this was a huge pop culture event for a lot of people. It became known as trademarked as the Migos versus the MAGA. So I mean, you talk about the hype. I think it was a little bit underrated as far as that goes. And then you talk about, the Falcons had one of the most one of the greatest offensive seasons in NFL history that no one really talks about. Um, you talk about the Patriots who were on a roll that entire year. They played through three quarterbacks early on in the year. Um, and they still managed to go 3-1 during that time, go 14-2 overall.
Yeah,
They were just like dominating everyone they played. So these two teams were on a collision course. You talk about Tom Brady himself, what he went through between the Deflategate suspension and then his mom having gone through, I think it was cancer, and
yeah,
she thankfully recovered through that. But he was going through a lot too himself, and all of that led to just like, I mean, the Falcons just got on a roll right away. And this wasn't like this started as a defensive game and then started really picking up in the second quarter. Falcons were running away. The Falcons, they put that gut punch in the third quarter with that fourth touchdown of theirs. And it looked
yeah,
like the game was over. And Tom Brady didn't do anything spectacular, but he was methodically laying down every play as a quarterback should, just cutting the Falcons defense open play by play by play. And I remember, watching the mic'd up version of this game, even as a 10-year-old, and there were so many iconic lines being said. Josh McDaniels coming to Tom Brady and coming to the wide receiver group and telling them one play at a time, just take it one play at a time. Don't do anything stupid. Don't try to do anything sexy. Just
yeah,
keep it one play at a time. You listen, you see that at the end of the thing, it's 28-9. They missed the extra point. They still said, all right, next play, next play. And of course, Bill Belichick again once saying, do your job. And everyone did. Everyone stepped up. James White stepped up. Julian Edelman stepped up. Danny Amendola stepped up.
yeah.
On defense, you had Trey Flowers, Dante Hightower,
I mean,
some of the secondary
you look at
players.
those 2 point conversions, Josh. I mean,
Yeah.
some of those 2 point conversions are daring. I mean, they
The
the
fake, the fake pass and the direct snap to James
you
White, that
know
was gutsy.
interestingly, they had run that play before only once through a Josh
Right.
McDaniels year before that. You know what that was?
When?
It was 2000, another Super Bowl. In fact, they ran it against the Carolina Panthers.
Correct.
One of those great Super Bowls. They ran it against the Carolina Panthers. Brady snap,
Yeah.
fake snap on the right. Running back comes in, goes inside for a touchdown. This was a 2 point conversion. I mean,
Right.
as you said, this was about forget exactly like what you said. Forget about trying to be cute and all that stuff. It's
Right.
about what can I do to get myself in a position to scoring. Forget winning. Look at scoring. It's. I think it's
Yeah,
one of those mindsets that NFL that coaches and players need to develop. It's not about the result. It's not about the result before going into the
for
game.
sure.
It's about just let me take that first step.
Right.
If I look at a stair, if I look at a stair, right, I'm walking up. I'm not thinking about me getting to the top. I'm thinking about letting my first step, getting on that first step, and then getting my ways closer and closer until
For
I get
sure.
to that top. And
And
I think that's the way they look at it.
and I mean that's the thing. Like they didn't try to jump the ladder. They just tried to climb each rung one by one, and they did that. And then you look at the defense stepping up with that key fumble down the line. I mean, Dante Hightower
Yeah.
was, being truly a leader of that defense, saying like, no more mistakes, no more my bads. Everything got to be perfect, and they were.
Mm.
Even when, and that's the thing. It's not like the Falcons weren't doing anything 100% wrong. Maybe their play calling, but they were effective on the
No,
play calling,
no,
right?
Josh, there was a key situation in the game where it was, I think, third and
Well, I'm
something.
gonna get to that. I'm gonna get to that.
All
Yeah.
right, okay,
Well,
go ahead,
that's what
go.
I'm saying though. But like they drove themselves down the field all the way to that place where Julio Jones made that incredible catch. They were making plays themselves, and then they
Arguably,
screwed it up, right? They
yeah.
decided to continue to throw the ball. They made a couple mistakes, but
No,
those
but you know
mistakes,
what
the
that was
Patriots,
though. You know what that was. The Patriots knew the entire time. You look at that play, right? I
yeah,
know you're gonna get to it, but I'll just say a little thing about it. I'm sorry.
yeah.
This is my dude. This is
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
moment I can talk about the Patriots when they were something, right? So you look at that specific play. It was a second away from being a touchdown. We
yeah.
forget that it was a second away from being a touchdown. So the idea was Matt Patricia, he literally said, go for a flat. When's the last time you said defense coordinator say go for a flag? Never. What he does, I forget the defensive lineman's name. It's Howie Long's son. I do
Oh,
know
Chris
that for
Long,
sure.
yeah.
Chris Long, right? So he goes in and they'd studied the entire week last time that the Chiefs played against, I think, the Colts or the Steelers rather. And what happened was Mike Tomlin had to essentially put James Harrison in a way that if he twisted his body at a certain angle, the tackle takes his if we're looking at it from a left tackle perspective from an offensive side, he takes it and he takes his left arm and he wraps it around the neck. So if I'm James Harrison, it's like this as I'm coming down here. If I go like
Right.
this, that's a flag immediately. If I have more
Right.
leverage, they practice that the entire week. So they essentially strangled Chris Long the
Yeah, and I
entire
mean
week.
that was what kind of made this game so special. The Falcons, when they made even just a little, like, they didn't necessarily make the biggest mistakes in the world, but when they just gave a little bit of gap, Patriots capitalized.
It's
They
the
were
small things that
perfect. That
matter.
would, I mean, they took advantage of everything and everything down, like you said, to the last minute detail, and that was what was the difference. And then they got the ball back, and Tom Brady did what Tom Brady did, not
Yeah.
once but twice. And Julian Edelman made that catch, and James White. I mean, that last drive in overtime, you knew once you saw that the Patriots were going to get the ball, you knew it was over. And
Over.
yeah, and it was like if you've seen Drew Brees, the final drive where they took the lead against the Colts in 2009, threw to like 9 different receivers. That's basically what Tom Brady did. He threw to Chris Hogan, perfect pass. He threw to Danny Amendola, perfect pass. Julian Edelman, perfect pass. Even the pass that was incomplete to, I think it was Martellus Bennett. Both
It was
times
a good pass.
they were both perfect passes, not good passes. And then they run the ball to James White, and White, it was in like slow motion, like, and it was
Everybody.
perfect.
Like,
I mean, that it was a perfect Super Bowl, like down 28-3, first overtime Super Bowl. Everything down to everything was
down to the wire.
detailed, oriented, for iconic moments, iconic lines by a lot of different players and coaches. I don't think there was a Super Bowl that it's going to take a lot of things to happen in one Super Bowl for any game to ever come close to this one, because it
I
really
would
set the
argue.
stakes.
I would argue. This is a different debate for another day, but I'm going to finish this off with this. That game is the greatest game in sports history. I will argue that to this day. I will argue that to this day. Give me another NBA Finals game. There could be. I don't know. I'm not the historian at the NBA that I am as much in the NFL, but I wouldn't argue there's another greater game than that game.
If you're
I'm
talking
serious.
American sports, I could get behind that, but you're gonna get upset a lot of soccer and a lot of cricket
No,
fans
you
with that
could,
statement.
yeah, you could bring up. I mean, look, you could
Yeah.
bring up Argentina and France. That was a great game. This last
05
past
Champions League
World
final.
Cup. Sure, but not to this level. I
That's true.
guarantee not to this level. I guarantee that. But okay, that's a
Yeah.
different
To
debate
each
for
his
another
own.
day, I guess.
Well, for
Um,
number two, I'm gonna go down a path that's actually kind of interesting. I know you're the guy who likes to be the old timer here, as far as like going back in time and
all
giving me
right, thanks
stuff
for
from the
calling me old.
1970s.
I shaved, by the way, just in case nobody noticed. I did shave though, so
Yeah. I like it.
just putting it out there.
But here's the thing. I mean, we've talked about before. You rave about last year's Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles. I've raved
Yeah,
about this Super Bowl in 2014 between the Patriots and the Seahawks. We talk
come
about
on.
the Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Eagles in
Mm-hmm.
2017. These are all like shootouts, or like
Yep.
plays where
Last minute.
yeah, last minute, exactly, or Super Bowls where the teams are going back and forth.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm gonna go with a game that really like set the standard for these games as far as
Okay.
both hype, as far as the shootout and the back and forth play between two Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And I think, Akhilesh, you know which
Okay.
game I'm talking about. It is Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, 13 between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys in 1978
Whoa! Hey, whoa.
or
Okay, okay,
1979.
okay.
I don't remember the year, but
No,
yeah.
go ahead.
But no, here's the thing.
Number two.
Yes, number two.
Those?
Okay, here's the thing. If you're talking about shootouts, all right, if you're gonna bring up the Chiefs Eagles game, if you're gonna bring up the Patriots Seahawks game, and a lot of people do, right? We talk about the attention to detail, we talk about the picks and all of this. The Steelers Cowboys Super Bowl had a lot of that at a time where you shouldn't have had that much. This was at a time where Super Bowls were built off the run game, were built off of defensive master classes. All right. And you had two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, two Hall of Fame defenses. And this was, I will still say, this is probably the most hyped up game in NFL history to this day. Okay. With the two Hall of Fame rosters that you had at the time. Okay. You had, if I'm not mistaken, 20 Pro Bowlers on, or 20, 20 Pro Bowlers or 20 All Pros on on those two teams combined. Something like 17 Hall of Famers, including coaches, including general managers, etc. Those two teams were on a collision course the entire year. The Steelers were one of the greatest teams in all of football that year, had 10 Pro Bowlers. Okay. You put those two teams on the standard. Everybody at the time was either a Steelers fan or a Cowboys fan. That was not in question. You had your favorite team, you had the Dolphins, the Raiders, but with how many teams that were there and you knowing that the Cowboys and the Steelers were going to make the Super Bowl, it had to be one of those teams that you were rooting for. You had to have one of a horse in, or you had to have a horse that you were voting for, basically. And that game happened between two guys that were known for methodically driving down the field slowly as ever, okay, and killing you with a touchdown at the last minute. Instead, this game was a shootout. Deep balls to Lynn Swan and Drew Pearson and John Stallworth and all those guys. All right. Key mistakes. There was a drop. I forget what his name was, but a Dallas receiver in the third quarter. You're talking about
actually.
Say
It was
it
a
again.
tight end. It was a tight end. Essentially, what happened was Roger Staubach came out of a shotgun, and the Chuck Noll's defense was positioned in a way that they actually, for the first time in a long time, if you look at it, they were a very simple. When you look at his system, it was a four defensive linemen, two safeties up top, like kind of what we run now today. But for the first time, they rolled over their strong side safety on the inside, who was Donnie Shell at that time.
Yeah.
I think they called him Boom or something, and like he could hit you hard. And then inside the tight end, I believe he was on the inside, right next to the tackle in the blocking position, or he was off in a kind of a bunch formation. They didn't call it that time; they called it different names, obviously. But he kind of came out on the outside. The strong safety was looking at an inside running back position. He kind of curled right in. Staubach took like a 3, 4, 5 step drop, had a two hitch. They didn't call it hitch at that time. That was all Bill Walsh. But um, look forward to our 101 video if you want to learn more about hitches, steps, and all that stuff. Just putting it out there. And then throws bullet right into him. And like I can see it now. It's right in his arms and just goes like and just
Just
comes
hits him in
off
the
and he
chest and
slips and
bounces
falls.
off. I mean,
I mean, look, we hate the Cowboys, but that's just sad. Like I love Tom Landry Cowboys. Ever since 1989, I think I just don't like those Cowboys. Just
and
don't
we
like
weren't
them.
even born in 1989, so that says something. Like we were
Yeah,
hating them from the womb, basically.
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
but nah, I mean, what I would say is just the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys set the standard for all of these high passing, these shootout type games later on once the NFL began to develop offensively. Um, you talk about the significance of that game, the hype of that game. There's nothing like that, and the fact that it lived up to all of that and more. You talk about the plays that were made on both sides. The Rocky Bleier touchdown at the start, the John Stallworth touchdown at the end. It was perfect. And then you talk about both defenses stepping up when they needed to. This wasn't just an offensive game. There were defensive plays made. Mean Joe Green had a key sack in the third quarter. You talk
Yeah,
about Mel Blount shutting down Drew Pierce for, I mean, an entire quarter, which doesn't sound like a lot, but given some of the plays that Pearson was running, some of the gutsy plays, I mean, he avoided 2 or 3 touchdowns at some point in that game. Um,
yeah.
and you're talking about these two quarterbacks basically setting themselves a legacy that, in my opinion, that kind of basically made them a little bit better than what their careers look like. Staubach, I think, definitely should get his flowers. He's one of the best quarterbacks ever. But Terry Bradshaw with the 4 Super Bowls, I think at times gets a little bit overrated. But those final 2 Super Bowls, those really kind of took his legacy from being, okay, he's a top 20 quarterback just aesthetically and how he plays the game to, okay, he might be a top 15 quarterback, top 10. Maybe you're looking at arguing a little bit. There's an argument to be made that he's a top 10 quarterback just based on those 2 Super Bowls and specifically that Super Bowl 13. So this was a legacy defining Super Bowl in every count. And I think for that matter, that's why I would put Super Bowl 13 there, just based on the history, the significance of the game, the hype, and the legacy the legacies it defined.
Look, I definitely had this in my top 10, but number two is way too high. You look at the other talents that has been displayed from the Super Bowl perspective. Look, I get it. It's a very, very. The reason why I put this on there was it was the start of a quarterback rivalry Super Bowl. I think that's where it started off from. I mean, you look at. I mean, we talk about 1978. 1975 is when this thing really started. I mean, you look at the Swan catch where he rises up and he follows through like
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
ballerina dancer, right? That started in 1975. 1976, I think 1977, the year before that, the Cowboys won against the Denver Broncos. So this was kind of the moment for the Steelers to reassert their dominance, and I get all that stuff, but number two is way too high for comparing magnitudes of Super Bowl to another extent. I think it's just way too high, but I'm not disagreeing with the fact that it wasn't a good Super Bowl. I'm just disagreeing it with the placement of where it has been made. But that being said, currently that is our number two now. Number three. Number three is a very difficult spot because for me it is a Patriots Super Bowl. For me, number three is a Patriots Super Bowl. Now, debating whether it's a loss or debating a win was where I struggled at. But I'm gonna go with what broke my heart. And I'm gonna go with 17-14 Giants winning the stupid helmet cat Super Bowl. It is an atrocious measurement of Steve Spagnuolo, defensive mastermind. I don't know what to say about that guy. I just don't like him. Like every single time Spags becomes a defense coordinator of a team, they just win all the time. I mean, that man has more rings than he's got fingers. At this point, he's just gonna go on a road chase. He's and every single time he has some miraculous thing happen to him. Look, we have to understand the magnitude of the Super Bowl, right? This is more than I would argue the magnitude that this Super Bowl had could be in at least the top five
For sure.
games in
Top
NFL
3, I
history.
would argue.
You look at the Miami Dolphins. 1972, first of all, an extremely overrated season. I'm just putting it out there. That was an overrated season by all measures. I mean, you look at the teams that they had to face, their schedule was not at all hard. Okay. There were some good teams, I'm not going to lie, but they were very well known old teams. When we look at it, like the 1968, 1969 Chiefs were different from the 1972 Chiefs, right? Because people always argue those Chiefs had Willie Lanier and
Bobby Bell and all those
Bobby
guys.
Bell, and first of all, amazing team. But that's not like a 1969 team. You had the Raiders who were up and coming, frankly, with I mean, just John Madden. Really, I mean, kind of vitalizing that team. You had the Steelers again, first time making the playoffs that season. So you didn't have too much competition. Let's just put that out there clear, right? So this team comes in and they're on a rampage. Tom Brady's having the best season of his career, 50 plus touchdowns. Randy Moss just comes in. People are saying he's not good enough from the Raiders. He comes in and he's balling out. I think 23 touchdowns that season, a record that still stands in the NFL today. You look at that passing, you look at the offense being unstoppable. Then you look at that defense being more like literally more unstoppable than ever before. And every single time they're pounding on any offense that comes in their way. And you look at the playoff run that they got to the Super Bowl, they were scoring like 50 points like it was some kind of taking candy from a baby or something. You know,
Right.
they just went on a rampage. And then they come to the Super Bowl where this random Giants team with Eli Manning, who looks like I don't know Mr. Bean, he doesn't get his British tea and biscuits or something from the TV show. Like this guy just looks like a maniac. No, have you ever seen him?
That was
The
a real
national anthem's going
I'll
on.
give
He's
it.
like,
Hey, shout out to Akilesh for that. That was one of his best similes I think he's put out there on.
no, I mean, just look at his face. Like the national anthem's going on, he just looks like a deer in the headlights.
Facts. That's true. Hey,
Like,
if anybody records a compilation of all the similes and metaphors that we've put on this podcast,
yeah,
please put that one. That
I'm
that
telling
one
you,
should be
bro.
number
Hey,
one.
yeah, look, we've got some good ones. ESPN, in case you need us. I'm just putting it out there. I mean, look, I'm still in high school. I don't mind, a good salary from a good job. You know what I'm saying? Immediately.
Internships.
No, I'm looking for more of a permanent position. If you guys get what I
Yep.
mean. Internship's kind of out of my category. But anyways, when
Yeah.
you look at out of your category, this is an out of category Super Bowl. You're 16-0. You're blowing away offenses. Michael Strahan with this old, I'm gonna jump in the air, woo, and he starts jumping all over everywhere else, and he's energizing the team. And the Patriots come in, they score 14 points. The
Right.
entire game, they only scored 14 points against this Giants team that we don't remember this. Randy Moss caught his 23rd touchdown against the Giants at Giants Stadium. So this team was well enough to do it. What did they do? Blow it all up. Blow it all up. Now I'm speaking like this because you guys know.
Yeah.
But I do have to give credit to the defense. That defense was impeccable. Like, and I look at drafts today, when I look at defensive linemen, pass rushers, when I look at those guys today, that's what I look for. I don't look at as much as like insane talent or this and that. I look at it from a pure essence of, is he giving everything he has on every single play? That defense gave everything it had because it had to give everything it had. You not one pass rusher ever when they ran the ball, most pass rushers that I'm seeing today, okay, opposite side of the field, they just go. These guys were running every single play. I love that. Honestly, like I hate the fact that we lost, but that just shows passion, that shows aggression, that just shows fight. Every single time, I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna pound every whatever way I can. Spags did his work. That offense, though, let's stop. I mean, come on. Like, it wasn't anything special to talk about. I mean, look, yeah, guys, that helmet catch, like, really? I mean, can we really stop talking about like it was a pure skill point at that? It was a lucky catch. All that guy did was Eli Manning came. First of all, that should have
You
been a
got to admit,
sack.
it is iconic though.
I
Might have
don't
not been the greatest
look,
technical catch, but it's iconic.
iconic, but that doesn't mean it was spectacular by any means. It was iconic. I get that. It was a lucky play. It wasn't like
Yeah.
Julio Jones was technique. That was perfection. This was just like, I'm not gonna study for an SAT, but I'm gonna get a 1600. That's what this was,
Right.
right? Eli Manning should have been sacked on the play, first of all. Like, I don't know how that happened. And then he came in and he just goes, whoop, I'm just gonna bop this ball up. You get hits on the ground,
Yeah.
right? And this man with Rodney Harrison, who is going for the Hall of Fame this year, and he gets up and he holds the ball like this, and Rodney's trying to take it out over the top. He can't do anything for some reason. Honestly, I think he cheated. I think he used Stickum in that game, and he purposely put Stickum on his hands before going out there. I would argue that the NFL wants to get on inflated balls or something. Get on the Stickum hands next time. That was
Patriots
no.
fans conspiracy theories, man.
No, I mean, why would you bring up after we bash the Colts like that? People are just tired of the Patriots winning. So what do? Deflate gate. Oh, the ball went out of tire pressure. Like, you guys are honestly stupid at some point to go after these things. Like, Bill Belichick is not some kind of, I don't know, hydrogen bomb machine or something, right? And he has the ball here, and we lose it. Look, I went on a rampage there. I'm sorry, I'll give it to
Oh
you,
yeah,
but
you're good. I mean,
this was this
hey,
was
I mean,
number three. It was number three, and only really because we had an opportunity to see something that we thought could have never been done, and it got stolen away because of Stickum.
so I'm
That's
gonna
what I'm gonna say.
reiterate kind of my criteria on what I kind of rank as far as Super Bowls. Generally, I'm more into like the aesthetic of the game as far as the hype too. As far as the hype, like you said, this is second and maybe none. Just as far as the idea of this is the perfect David Goliath story. If there's anyone in any sport,
Yeah,
I'd argue this is the greatest underdog story ever. There are a few that you can argue in that category in other sports. I think about like the Mighty Ducks or the USA versus the Soviets in hockey or something like
yeah,
that.
that's it. That's it. That's the most
Right.
underdog story.
But I mean, the thing is with this Super Bowl that I wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily put it this high. I would put it like around 5, just based on the fact that the
Ooh.
offense of the Giants, the Patriots, the defensive performance of the Giants was flawless. Like you said, there's nothing that you said that I can't or that I want to restate because you said everything. Um, as far as the Patriots defense, I think they didn't capitalize on, as much on Giants errors, and that's kind of where the reason this game was so close. I think if the Patriots had capitalized off this defense, they would have still won the game. Or if the Giants offense had played better, they would have won this game. They didn't, but it came down to, of course, the final play, the final drive where Manning, made that incredible throw to David Tyree, and then finished off the drive with the touchdown to Plaxico Burress. Um, I will still never understand how he won the MVP in that game. I think it should have gone to one of the defensive linemen, OC Umenyiora, Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck. But the fact of the matter is, that's kind of where I stand on the Super Bowl. I just question, I just don't like putting the offensive performance of Eli Manning that high. And for that reason, I wouldn't necessarily put it higher than what I have at number 4, um, which is a game that I thought had enough offense that it made it thrilling, but this was a defensive masterclass. Also, the significance of this Super Bowl as far as just football being an American sport and kind of this representing, symbolizing the unity of America at the time. Being this was, I think, Super Bowl 25 between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Giants, and I have that at number 4. Both of us being Americans, for any one of our fans who's non-American, at the time we were in war, and we were in war, helping Kuwait in against Iraq in 1990. It was around the end of the Cold War, so there was a lot of turmoil for us internally, politically. We were undergoing some change after the Ronald Reagan presidency. So there was a lot that was in the mind of American soldiers and American people in general. Um, and you look at this New York Giants team going in the biggest city of New York and being the ultimate underdog, having just upset the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game. You know, what they did in the 1990 Super Bowl is nothing short of excellent. That Bill Belichick defensive plan is in the Hall of Fame for a reason. Um, and Bill Parcells' coaching plan, in my opinion, his speech should also be in the Hall of Fame. What he said about how this is the Super Bowl, and if you're not motivated, then you should not be here because it's the Super Bowl. Um, and this Buffalo Bills offense was on a tear going into this Super Bowl with guys like James Lofton, Andre Reed, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas. They were perfect on every level. And I've talked about Jim Kelly being one of the more underrated quarterbacks in Super Bowl history before. Um, but this was a defensive masterclass. And you saw time in and time out Jim Kelly just standing on the sideline, just pacing back and forth because he was helpless. He couldn't do anything as the Giants just kept running the ball down their throat. And that's, I think, what made this game so good. It was so based on every little play, every single play. And it was just a slow, painful kill for the Buffalo Bills. And yet, even then, they were in the game and they were still doing what it took to stay in the game. But of course, we're talking about this being a Super Bowl too. So I have to kind of bring in the halftime show or not the halftime show, but the pregame national anthem sung by Whitney Houston. One of the best things you'll ever see at a Super Bowl. I mean, people were crying. It was such a beautiful moment. You had Bon Jovi watching the Super Bowl, kind of motivating the Giants fans. It was poetry in motion. And then you add in the fact that, of course, the game ended up being the only 1 point loss ever, and the wide right, which was a term that basically coined every game-winning field goal or a game-losing missed field goal afterwards. You talk about wide left by Blair Walsh in 2015, all that. It's the worst missed field goal in the history of the football ever. And it was something that started the boy I love losing Super Bowl phases for the Buffalo Bills, the 4 straight Super Bowls that they lost in the early 90s. So historically, it had all the significance. For anybody who is a defensive, we talked about an offensive shootout earlier. Now we're talking about I think the game that really set the standard for modern day defensive Super Bowls, and that was the Buffalo Bills versus the New York Giants. How they shut down an incredible offense in that was led by Jim Kelly. I don't think you're gonna get any closer to that as far as what the American morale was, as far as the Super Bowl and how the game ended up playing out. It lived up to all the hype and more because of what the game was and what it represented for so many Americans at the time. So that's why I would say it's number 4.
I couldn't agree more. This Super Bowl defined defense like no other. I mean, you look at the game plan. The it was about really it was I think when you look at this Super Bowl, you it was the first time you saw it wasn't about just the players or just the coaches. It was about the team. I think that's the first time I saw a Super Bowl like this because it was not a great team by any measures. I mean, you look at a backup quarterback coming in for Phil Simms, who
Yeah,
was having one of his better seasons. You look at Otis Anderson, who was a washed-up running back coming out of Arizona. You look at that defense with an extremely old LT. You don't have Harry Carson, one of the I think the most underrated Hall of Fame middle linebacker
for
ever,
sure.
coming out of the New York Giants. Interestingly, was a defensive lineman coming out of North Carolina. But besides that, I mean, you have Carl Banks, who was also getting very old. It just all came together that day with Bill Belichick and that mastermind, Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick defense, the greatest coaching staff of all time, no question, from the New York Giants. And everything came together that day to go out there and do your job. I think that was, without a doubt, I think that's fourth. Just because of the wide right, that's fourth. I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So now we finished our top four. And I've been going on this rant about the New England Patriots every single time I've gone one, three, but I just think it has to happen again. I just don't. I know it's gonna sound like a recording message, but I do. I think we all know where I have to go with this one. I mean, it is. I don't like saying this, but it is kind of obvious. I think we have to go with Super Bowl 49 with the Seahawks versus the Patriots. It has to be said. I mean, you look at. Well, let's look at it from the start. The Seattle Seahawks had constructed the Legion of Boom, and it literally was its prime from 2012 to 2014. It was its prime. You could argue later on, but that was where they just could not be stopped when we look at it. They come in the previous year with Russell Wilson, very young quarterback, to be frankly honest with you, coming out of Wisconsin, is not your normal quarterback who's going to stay in that pocket and deliver those passes. More of, I'm just going to do whatever kind of, have a good arm, so I'm just going to use it, right? And they make it all the way to the Super Bowl. They dismantle one of the greatest offenses ever with the Peyton Manning and those Broncos. That was one of the greatest offenses ever. And
They
you look at it
toyed with
from
them
a
like a cat with a mouse, basically.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at it from a statistical standpoint, you look at it from anywhere you want. It was just great. And the Seattle Seahawks just dismantled that offense. You look at that was a horrible loss for the Denver Broncos. The New England Patriots hadn't won in over a decade, and slowly that dominance of Tom Brady. Tom Brady's a wash up. Max Kellerman's whole Tom Brady's on a downfall. Well, it didn't begin in 2014, but you know what I mean. Everybody's just like Tom Brady's just another quarterback now. He had to assert himself, prove himself. What does he do? Gets back to the Super Bowl, gets down, right? And every all the chips are against him. You look at Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas. To me, that's the most dominant backfield in terms of defensive back safety that one may have ever seen. That's just, I mean, highlight after highlight reel. I mean, the NFL. If you look at the NFL, if you go to Legion of Boom highlights, they made a whole booklet out of it in Legion of Boom. That's how dominant this defense was, right? And they come in with Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski, and they went in there and they said, "We got it. Every step matters." And then that's what they did. And then they do this. this is where Patriots Super Bowls always just rank among the top. It comes down, they're up 20-24, ball is in Russell Wilson's hands. They are giving him, I mean, they are just the defensive mind, which I mean, we forget that was a great defensive line that the Patriots had in that time. Chandler Jones off that right side. I mean, they were just dominant, and they were putting the pressure. Russell Wilson throws up a prayer, and Malcolm Butler, I think he was like a sixth round pick or an undrafted guy coming into the
Undrafted.
Patriots, undrafted,
Yeah.
knocks the ball out better than most cornerbacks that you'll ever see today. And somehow Chris Hogan, if I'm not wrong, was the
It was
receiver.
Jermaine Curse.
Who
Jermaine
is
Curse.
okay?
Chris Hogan
Jermaine
plays for the
Kearse.
Patriots.
I'm telling you guys, I'm off. Jermaine Kearse comes in, bounces off both legs, somehow manages to catch it, and then runs for more yards. Like, who tells that? I just think there's a football god that's like, when we shine that light on that Patriots dynasty, we gotta show every single like big, crazy, unexpected thing to happen. That's what happened with the Jermaine Kearse catch. And then this is where I think this one play sums out the Patriots. That just separates them from any other dynasty. I think it was Ernie Adams, who is he's a very I don't know the position that he's on with the Patriots, but he's definitely one of the most respected people in the NFL right now. That entire week, they practiced the same last play that the Seattle Seahawks ran. Like how?
Right.
It's like you. I mean, people think that they cheat for this reason. Like the perfect inside, I'm gonna block that cornerback on the outside so that he has enough space to come in and get for that touchdown. We forget the previous play, Marshawn Lynch ran it. He could have got a touchdown on that play hadn't Dante Hightower went up using that arm and
Right.
kind of hit him on the outside. That would have been a touchdown. Malcolm Butler that entire week, what he had done is the inside, the receiver, if it's like this, and then he's another receiver's like this, the guy who's on here, Malcolm Butler was playing off him. He always came around to try to stop it like this.
Right.
The entire week, he had got it wrong every single time. What happens in the Super Bowl? Directly comes in, punches it in,
Right.
interception. Tom Brady's reaction, hugging Jimmy Garoppolo, and then Josh McDaniels too. The entire team just going up in flames. You look at the play before, and then everybody on the headset, like you gotta imagine, it's a very tense moment, right? Everybody on the headset is just going like, "Hey, Bill, you want to watch out for this? It might be a run. You want to set in this formation or this goal line formation." You could see on the videotape, Bill's like, "I got it." That's just full confidence at any
Right.
level to know that you're going to send out a nickel defense with 5 yards on the ball. It's crunch time Super Bowl, and that I mean you could argue that was a bad call, okay? And I agree, it was a bad call. Marshawn Lynch should have got that ball easy end zone touchdown. I don't disagree more than that, but I don't mind. It's another
Right.
Super Bowl. What can I say? But the Cats on the inside. That's the greatest Super Bowl ever because it was the resurgence of a dynasty. It was the depletion of a great defense, and it was without a doubt the greatest defensive play in NFL history.
I'd agree with you. Yeah, and I'm trying to think in my head if there's any other, but no, you're absolutely correct.
The only one you could argue, Yash, is the James Harrison pick six. That's
No,
the only one you could,
I'd still
but
put
this is
the
better.
Malcolm Butler because of where it
Yeah.
was in the game and whatnot. But I mean, I want to say I want to go on a rant here, but I'll save it for another day. Maybe we'll do this on a day where we do a what if Marshawn Lynch had run the ball. It's just my kind of irritation to a comment that Chris Collinsworth said at the end involving that play. But like you said, the Patriots had practiced that one play so much throughout the entire week. Malcolm Butler had been working through that play, whatnot throughout the entire week, and he stepped up when it mattered most. The fact that Brian Flores, got him into the game at that point, which was unexpected. The Seahawks
Mhm.
realized that, but he was playing a spectacular game. He got
Yeah.
unlucky with that Jermaine Curse catch, and he made up for it and more with the interception at the end. Made a name for himself. This is what the Super Bowl does. I mean, it makes unknown names into household ones. For a while, Malcolm Butler, was one of the most popular cornerbacks in the league. I used to, at the time, I didn't know as much about football, so I used to vote him every year in the Pro Bowl, although he probably
Yeah.
shouldn't have been. But this idea kind of still stands that was what basically made a name for himself. He went from being unknown and an undrafted player to becoming a household name. But this Super Bowl was far more than that. I don't think people understate how much this meant. I mean, for me as an 8-year-old kid, like I said, I didn't know as much about football at the time. After the Super Bowl between the Broncos and the Seahawks, literally a minute after, not even that long after, I went to my dad and I'm like, wow, the Seahawks killed the Broncos. And I'm sitting here as a Niners fan rooting against the Seahawks and all of this. But I'm like, now imagine if the Patriots had played them. What would this game fared out to be? And I think that'll be my Super Bowl. I predicted that right then and there. That was the first Super Bowl matchup that I think I ever predicted between the Seahawks and the Patriots. And I predicted it right then and there. And I was absolutely right. These two teams went in a collision course. And what
Yeah.
you said about the Legion of Boom defense, they were spectacular. They were dominant on all levels. Richard Sherman was the best cornerback. I don't care what you want to say. Patrick Peterson was not even close to the best cornerback compared
Yeah.
to Richard Sherman. He was on an entire island on his own.
Yeah, he
Those
was.
2 years, you really could compare him to Deion Sanders as far as how he's playing. He was
No, you
really,
couldn't.
really, really, really that good.
No.
And then you add in, Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas in the back. I mean, how do you
Mm.
stop the secondary, right? And I think a lot of people forget about Marshawn Lynch himself. You didn't necessarily talk as much about Marshawn Lynch. It's
Yeah.
unfathomable to me that he only won one first team All Pro selection in his career. He has only one. That year, I
Yeah.
think he should have won over DeMarco Murray. I don't know why DeMarco Murray won that year. If you looked at any tape of Marshawn Lynch, like everyone would grab him and he'd still get a touchdown. He would get a touchdown.
Yeah.
He led the league in touchdowns, I think 3 or 4 times during that span from 2011 to 2014. And like you said, Russell Wilson was starting to come into his own. They had 2,000-yard receivers. I think I would argue the 2014 team as a whole was better than 2013
Yeah,
team. It was just
for
the
sure.
defense was more dominant in 2013. And, this Super Bowl was really, really, really hyped as like the kind of like the bridge between two dynasties and almost like a passing of the torch, which the Patriots didn't allow. But this was the perfect combination between offense and defense in a game. Tom Brady torched the Seahawks secondary in the second half, but the Patriots defense stepped up. The Seahawks
Yeah.
defense was still pretty good. And it was just this thing where, they had every player had their moment. Jeremy Lane had a moment. Unfortunately, he tore his ACL right after and nobody really talked about him. But he was having a great first quarter, locking up Julian Edelman. Then he left the game and Julian Edelman started to pick up. And I mean, this is kind of like where you're talking about Chris Matthews made a name for himself in the second quarter.
Yeah.
Incredible. What he basically made the 2 plays that basically got the Seahawks their touchdown right before. And then
Mhm.
Marshawn Lynch starts doing his thing. Bobby Wagner starts doing his thing. Then Tom Brady does Tom Brady things. They're down 10, which was the largest deficit in Super Bowl history at the time. They come back. They take the lead with less than a minute or close to a minute, if I'm not mistaken. And then,
Yeah.
of course, the final drive. It was drama to it was drama to its finest. And I don't think, you can really talk about as balanced and as hyped up of a Super Bowl without talking about Super Bowl 49.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's well deserving for that. I'm gonna go to this one was a little debatable. I kind of planned a couple Super Bowls before we made this episode before the Super Bowl. And of course, I think the Super Bowl kind of changed my plans on this because of how dramatic and how the Super Bowl ended up turning out to be.
Okay.
But I am going to go with this current year's Super Bowl as the next, being that it was an overtime Super Bowl, being
Oh
that
gosh.
it was a Super Bowl of high individual performances that most of them ended up turning out to be wasteful on both sides of the game, given what happened with Mahomes, of course, driving down the field and winning the game. I think given somewhat of the controversy, given somewhat of the hype, given the fact that this was a rematch, And I think also you have to take in consideration some of the injuries and some of just the overall willpower of this game. You look at it from an aesthetic standpoint. There were some moments in the game where there was definitely lull, because it got a little boring. There were some, times where the offense was just playing bad and wasn't the defense. But this was a defensive masterclass on both sides. You talk about the forced fumbles. You talk about the lockdown play from Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed. Then you talk about the plays that the Niners secondary started to make at the end. You talk about D. Lenore locking down who was it? I think it was MVS for a long time. Then MVS starts to step up. Nicole Hardman makes some big plays. They started to backfire. Nobody can really do anything in the red zone. Then it gets to the point where you need a trick play to start the first touchdown of the game. Field goal broken records, all of that. And the fact of the matter, I mean, a lot of things have come out after the Super Bowl that make me appreciate this more and more. You talk about two of the offensive linemen of the Kansas City Chiefs were playing with torn ligaments. Patrick Mahomes had apparently had some ligament damage in his finger. You talk about the 49ers. Armstead was playing with a torn meniscus. Javon Kinlaw was playing through injury. Dre Greenlaw was playing through Achilles tendonitis and was superb until, unfortunately, his Achilles tore. George Kittle was playing through injuries. He didn't exactly play the greatest game, but his blocking was superb for most of the game. And I mean, all of that in total, with the fact that this was a rematch, with the fact that the final quarter of this game was just flawless on sides, as far as each play mattered so much to both teams. Um, Purdy really, I think, showed that he's not a system quarterback, or at least what the media defines as a system quarterback. I know you talked about this early in the episode. And then Mahomes showed why he's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. Um, and then the overtime, kind of just the controversy around the rules. The 49ers still ended up driving down the field. They missed a block, and then Mahomes did Mahomes things at the end. And every player was fighting. Kelsey was fighting for yards. Mahomes got that one play down the end. This really was a legacy defining Super Bowl, like we talked about earlier, for so many players. And I think just the overall hype that the Super Bowl, the overall storyline that the Super Bowl provided, in addition to kind of the modern day defensive breath of fresh air that this gave to a lot of offensive shootouts that we've seen in recent years. That's why I would put this Super Bowl up there alongside the overtime as one of the greatest Super Bowls ever. And I know that might be controversial, but I don't care.
Look, I think you're still suffering from the emotional loss. I don't
Why
know.
would I put a Super Bowl that I have so many emotional loss
No, no, no,
here?
no, no, Yash. The only reason why you're putting it up there is because your boys actually had a chance of winning it and they blew it, and you were
They
just
had
proud
a
of them.
chance in Super Bowl 47 too.
No. Okay, first of all, that was a 31-21. Okay, loss that year or
No, no,
some
no, no.
so
Super Bowl
something. Some,
47 between the Ravens and us in
oh,
2012.
yeah, well, I mean that was just bad play calling at that point. But like, let's just, I mean, we talk about a defensive masterclass, 300 plus yards on offense from a passing perspective from Patrick Mahomes isn't exactly a defensive masterclass. Like, the score does not exactly represent a defensive masterclass. Like, I understand. He wasn't a defensive masterclass by
The
any
forced
measures.
fumbles, the turnovers, the amount of pressures that they put on Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes was just better. That's
Yeah,
where I would stand on that.
no, that's an offensive game. Just because your defense balls out and it has a great lot of pressures, great this, great that, yeah, that's all there. But you're also giving up 300 plus passing yards. You're also allowing Mahomes to run. When I told this, and I told this in previous episodes, and I'll say it again, the key to beating the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, I think, is stopping Mahomes on the run. It just it beats you down, right? Because now all these other players they have an opportunity to catch their breath. Mahomes can throw the ball deep, so that's how it.
Right.
I think that's my perspective on it. I just think this is way too high, right now. Right now, I think considering it just finished, but I think it could be definitely a top 10 Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know if it's number 6, considering number 7. I think should have been number 6. 38-35, Kansas City Chiefs over the Philadelphia Eagles. Without a doubt, that should have been number 6. This time it's number 7. But let's look at this. First time in NFL history, if I'm not wrong, 2 African American quarterbacks are going up against each other. First time in NFL history that, or not the first time in a long time rather, that 2 number 1 seeds on each AFC and NFC are coming together to play to win it all. First time, I believe, 2
No, it's not the first.
All-Pro.
Wait. Would you say that again? The last one.
First time in a long time that
Oh, in
2
a long
number
time.
1
Okay,
seeds
I
from the
misheard you.
NFC and AFC have come together to play it all, right? First time ever, if I'm not wrong, that 2 All-Pro brothers come together to play against each other in the Super Bowl where it most matters after having probably the best sports podcast on the planet, right? Well, it's gonna be second. You
There
guys
you
get what
go.
I'm
There you
saying.
go.
But saved them. I saved one there, man. Okay. The point is, you look at that defense, the Philadelphia Eagles defense did something that hadn't been done since 1985 with the Chicago Bears. We talk about those 85 Bears. This defense had, I think, the same or more sacks in a season than those 85 Bears. The offense, just people didn't know what to do. Jalen Hurts was running or he was throwing. A.J. Brown was dominating on every single sphere. Then you come to the game with the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce balls up. Patrick Mahomes had under 200 yards, but he ran the ball again and again and again. I keep on missing his name. Isaiah what? Pacheco?
Isaiah Pacheco, yeah.
Pacheco, he comes in and he dominates on the run game. You look at the receivers that they had, the perfect balls that Patrick Mahomes was balling out, and then you look at Jalen Hurts, who could have won the Super Bowl if he just didn't go like, "Oh, I'm gonna give you the ball here." He fumbles it, gives them a touchdown. Right? This was drama at its finest. I think this was drama at its finest. You look at the 2-point conversion that Shane Steichen called before tying 35-35. That's a horrible. When we look at it, I was thinking to myself, well, this is not going to work. You're just giving it to the Jalen Hurts, and you're just letting him run it in. But that's how good the offensive line was. That's how talented that blocking scheme was. They go and they get that 2-point conversion. Patrick Mahomes does his stupid 13-second thing, comes in, just balls out for about like a minute or something, gets a field goal, wins it all. Like, and then another thing, we forget this. Andy Reid, when he came to Kansas City, fired Nick Sirianni without knowing who he was, nothing about him. Nick Sirianni has a chance to go up to Andy Reid and say, "You missed out on your golden opportunity." He could have done it, right? So this was drama beyond measures, right? From historical standpoint, from
Not
just
to
an
mention, this
overall
was between the
aggression
two teams
standpoint.
with the most wins ever, like on average,
Yeah,
going up in the Super Bowl.
30 to
Obviously, that's with
35.
context of the 17-game season, but still,
Sure, but like still 38 to 35. I mean,
yeah.
you talk about greatest games. That was that was easily should have been number 6 to me. But
Here,
in this case, it's number 7.
here's my criticism with that. I would just argue that the defense in that game was very, very, very lackluster in comparison to the 49ers Chiefs game. You're talking about the same amount of pressures, but they were able to minimize plays against the Chiefs at times, and yet the Chiefs offense was still there. Like I said, the balance of the offense and the defense was a little more there with the Chiefs Niners Super Bowl compared to the Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl. That's what I'm kind of looking for, a
Okay,
little bit
Yash,
more balance.
you keep talking about this defensive thing. So are you gonna put the 2018 Patriots versus Rams up there then?
No, so this is what this is. So you've asked me about that before, and this is where I will get to that. I like a I like a Super Bowl that kind of has a balance of offense and defense. I liked your pick of the Patriots Seahawks Super Bowl for that reason. It was a kind of a Super Bowl where there was a balance. There were great offensive plays made, great defense plays made. Similar thing you can also say about the Steelers Cowboys Super Bowl, even though it was indeed a shootout.
Yeah.
I don't think you can say that about the Chiefs Eagles Super Bowl with the amount of missed tackles that there were. And I'm not even talking about Mahomes. I'm talking more
Look at
just
the first
about,
half though. What happened in the first half? Mahomes was shut down the entire first half.
okay, but let's also talk about how many times that they would get into, the Chiefs were able to get down the field, score 2 touchdowns, and that happened because Travis Kelce would get in the middle of the field, get the ball in the middle of the field, and Kaiser White and TJ Edwards would constantly miss tackles. Let's talk about the fact that James Bradbury and Darius Slay were constantly blowing coverages against
Mhm.
cornerbacks who weren't even, or against receivers who weren't even
Let's
close to
talk
covering
about the fact
receivers
that
that they had
Kansas
locked
City
down better.
receivers were literally holding on to the cornerbacks as they were going, right? No flags,
Okay.
no flags on them. Let's talk about the fact that the cornerbacks, when they were running up, literally had, I swear to you, went like this on the guy. That's all. That's all. Got flagged for that for some reason. I mean,
That was that. See, that's the thing. I would say that's more like that was more later, like more in the middle of the game, more than in the beginning of the first quarter. But the missed tackles were something that continued to happen all game,
yeah, see,
throughout the
okay,
game, and
you,
that's
you
where I
can you
just
can blame the
can't.
Eagles defense on that, but are you saying that's not a top 10 Super Bowl because they couldn't make
Oh, I'm not saying
tackles?
it's not a top 10 Super Bowl. It's certainly a top 10 Super Bowl.
Oh.
But for you to put it number 6, that's where I personally argue that I think time will tell on that Super Bowl, whether, the hype of the Super, whether, how good that Super Bowl ended up being based on the rosters, based on the talent that was on those rosters. I think we need to wait till see, okay, will this Super Bowl have like the amount of Hall of Famers that it looked to have at the time that the Super
Hmm.
Bowl happened? I
Okay.
think the
So that's
Patriots and
that's a good point. I'll
yeah,
give you
the
that. That's a
Chiefs and
good
the
point.
Niners Super Bowl definitely you have that added addition where I said like there was the balance, but also the idea that okay, this was a rematch. There are for sure. I mean, you talk about Trent Williams, maybe now Fred Warner, George Kittle, and perhaps Christian McCaffrey on the 49ers. On the Chiefs, you have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, Andy Reid, probably Chris Jones at this point. So you already had like 8 for sure first ballot Hall of Famers. The Eagles were a little bit on the younger side as far as teams. And of course, they've fallen down this year. So I just can't get behind the fact that this Super Bowl is that high. Maybe down the line, I would agree with you, but I feel like this is a wait and see game. But the reason why I would say is number one, just lack of defense. Number two, it's a wait and see game, and then number three, it's just like to me, I don't know. It to me, I mean, the idea that basically this was not exactly the greatest balance of a game. That's kind of where I stand on that. So that's kind of why I don't have it as high, but I get your points for sure. I just don't fully agree with it.
Okay.
Um, at number 8, however, this is a Super Bowl I'm surprised has not gotten on the list. Maybe I'm not because a lot of people in every sport underrate it, but I'm going to go with one of the more underrated Super Bowls in NFL history, a Super Bowl that I don't think the significance of the game is talked about nearly as much as it should be, and it's going to be the 1998 Super Bowl between the Denver Broncos and the Green Bay Packers. The reason
Mm.
why this Super Bowl is so significant is because the AFC had not won a Super Bowl in 15 years. Put that in perspective. 15 years. The last time before 1997 that the AFC had won a Super Bowl, okay? Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States. The Soviet Union was still a nation, okay? Michael Jackson had just released his Thriller album, okay? MTV had just been released, okay? All of that. Dr. J was dominating. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson was in the NBA. That was what we were talking about in all of pop culture happening in 1983. That was the last time the AFC had won a Super Bowl, and now suddenly the Denver Broncos come basically drunkenly falling into a Super Bowl against a Green Bay Packers team that had been taking everybody by storm, was dominant all year, and was trying to go for back-to-back Super Bowls. All right. And this was a John Elway led Broncos team that had they had been to 4 Super Bowls, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 5. And they had lost all of them, right? John Elway had gained the reputation of a choker, and he was in the twilight of his career. And Terrell Davis was the best player. He was the one who had basically guided them to the Super Bowl that year. And he had migraines. He forgot to take his medications, and for that reason, he was struggling throughout most of that game. And John Elway stepped up and basically put the team on his back, scoring touchdowns. Of course, he had that iconic helicopter run. Um, and that was in spite of the fact that the Packers defense, Reggie White, was all over him throughout that game. They were pressuring him, and he was making throw after throw after throw. And this was a little bit of that shootout, but a little bit of some great defensive plays by the Broncos defense. The Packers defense held Denver up for a while. Then Denver started to rally, they started to get, take the lead a little bit, and then they never really looked back. And Brett Favre and the company, they just couldn't get past Denver's defense. And at the end of the game, they were just a little bit short. And that's kind of what ended up being the difference in the game. And that's why, Denver ended up winning. But it was truly a David versus Goliath story. I just don't think enough people talk about. But it is one of the greatest Super Bowls based on the significance of where the AFC and the NFC was at the time. And just, kind of people were talking about whether the AFC would ever win, whether John Elway would ever win. And it cemented himself as one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, based on just that he could finally win that championship. And it started a legacy of choking for Brett Favre in the playoffs after that kind of destroyed his reputation. And I think that's kind of the storyline that Super Bowl played, that basically changed the trajectory of two guys' careers, whether one was a really, really young player and one was a really, really old player, and kind of how they were looked at once, you compare their careers, because they're pretty similar players. But as far as, what their resumes look like, their reputations look quite different just because of that one game. And I don't think enough people talk about it.
I agree. I mean, I'm glad you brought this one up because this is a Super Bowl that is not talked about enough. The significance behind it, the energy, I think everything just came together. And fine, honestly, I think any fan, regardless, even if you're a Kansas City fan or anything like that, you would have just been happy for John to have won that Super Bowl at that time. So great pick. This next pick, I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for. Like I already know I'm gonna get an insane amount of hate for. But it is honestly, you could argue this is the most important Super Bowl ever. Not the best one, but it's the most important Super Bowl ever. And it has to be said, if you don't have this, you don't have any Super Bowls like this. You don't. Period. The New York Jets versus the Baltimore Colts in 1969. It has to be said. You talk about, you can walk away, Yash, but you realize there's no AFC or NFC without this. There is no AFC NFC without this. Let's think about it from a historical standpoint. The NFL had won a championship every single year, right? They won the championship every single year. The AFL was just another league. Like how we look at the XFL now, that was the AFL at that current time. We look at the players that were there. We look at the Raiders who were extremely dominant at that time. We look at the Chiefs. Look at this Jets team. I'm not saying this Jets team was a good team by any means, right? But if you look at those Baltimore Colts, you could argue that is one of the better defenses that the NFL has ever seen. You look at how Bubba Smith, people don't talk about him enough. As a defensive end coming in from that right side, great defensive player. This is going to sound like a Chris Mad Dog Rousseau type deal, but I'm very serious about this. This has to be a top 10 Super Bowl because if you don't have the Super Bowl, you don't have any other Super Bowl ever. We look at this. Look at the offense. Johnny Unitas, who had been injured the entire year. What happens? Earl Morrall comes in, wins MVP. They average nearly, if I'm not wrong, at least 25 points a game from a statistical standpoint every game. At that time, that just doesn't happen, right? You have Don Shula, up and coming head coach, go 15-1, or not 15-1 at that time, 13-1 and 12-1, based on how many games that were there that year. Chuck Noll being the defensive coordinator at that time for Don Shula. You have a future general manager of the New York Giants working under Don Shula at that time. You look at this New York Jets team, it's a washed up Joe Namath, who's, first of all, the most overrated quarterback ever. You look at their running backs, bunch of nobodies. Look at that offensive line, a very average offensive line. That defense was the only thing that got them there to that Super Bowl. Look at they beat out the Oakland Raiders. They had easily the toughest AFC opponents into the playoffs. They go through everything. And now they're at the Super Bowl where Joe Namath is playing against his idol, Johnny Unitas, in the Super Bowl, right? This was supposed to be a wash. This is supposed to be a blowout game. Don Shula is supposed to have now his third Super Bowl, right? What happens? They blow them up. 16 is we understand it's only a 16-7 game. I get that. But at the same time, it's only because the New York Jets won that the AFC and the NFC became a thing. Before that, it was AFL and NFL. It's only after the New York Jets won that people realized AFL teams can beat out NFL teams. The best NFL team that they'd ever seen to that point just got beat out by an average AFL team. That's when the league understood we have to incorporate these guys. We won't be talking about Patrick Mahomes as the greatest NFL quarterback. We would be talking about him as the greatest AFL quarterback. Tom Brady would have never been the best NFL quarterback. He would have been the best AFL quarterback. That's how we would have judged these guys had the Super Bowl not happened. So I understand it's not a good scoring game. It's not by any means a technique standpoint out of this world class Super Bowl, but the drama and the impact that it's had on the league, there's not been a single game more important than this one. That's why it has to be a top 10 Super Bowl. If you want to put it at number 10, I'm fine with that, by all means. But it
Look, I
has
get, I
to be
get, I
said.
get your argument behind it, but like I said, my criteria of the Super Bowl also involves like everything, and just involves also the idea of the game. The game
Hmm.
was terrible. It was just
Yeah,
terrible in this
it
game.
was.
It was a
It
really
was.
trash, terrible game, right? But
Yeah.
I get why you put it here. I'm not gonna argue with it, but I'm just,
Look, I hate
I
it too. Josh, this is what you have to understand. I hate this pick. This was a horrible game. One of the worst games ever. It was horrible. I get it. But
but
it has
it
to
was
be
instrumental
said
to
because
Super
it's the most important game in NFL history. You
probably. I
don't
agree
have
with
this
you.
game, you don't have the NFL that we know of today.
Yeah.
It's horrible. I get it, but it has to be said. It's one of those things like if you don't like broccoli, you got to eat it. Still, it's good for you. You may not like water, but you have to drink it. You don't have an option.
Oh well.
You don't.
Well, I mean, there goes our list as far as perfect games. But I mean, yeah, definitely agree.
You
Again,
can't. You have to put it up there. You don't. You just can't leave it off. You keep it number 10. I'm fine, but you have to put it up there.
I'm conflicted now. There are two Super Bowls that I would put here. One of them was more recent. Again, I question as just again like the defensive. There were some defensive moments definitely in this game, but not in comparison to the other one. I think as far as drama, let me ask you this, Akilesh. I'm gonna actually ask you.
Mm.
Between you, would you prefer like a great aesthetic of one part of one game, where there were a few like there was a lot of offense in this game, but there was one or two key defensive plays, but other than that, it was mostly an offensive game?
Mm.
Or would you prefer a game where it was high drama, come back from down double digits, you come back and it ends up being last second, last minute?
Last second, last minute.
So in that case, for that reason, I'm going to be putting the 1999 Super Bowl or the 2000 Super Bowl between the Los Angeles Rams and the St. Louis Rams and the Tennessee Titans as my last Super Bowl. Of course, this is the Super Bowl that came just 1 yard short from being tied and going into overtime. We talk about the significance of this game. These were two teams that had nobody thought were ever going to make the Super Bowl at the same time, and they did. Tennessee, was this, they had just moved from Houston. They were, recovering from the high drama late. I think it was the 1991 Oilers, or it could be 93, where there was just so much tragedy that happened to the team before they moved. Kind of just constantly choking in the playoffs, the blown comeback against the Buffalo Bills, and then they finally managed to get to the Super Bowl behind the back of Eddie George and Steve McNair. Meanwhile, the Rams, of course, they build the greatest offense in the league behind an undrafted free agent in Kurt Warner, who he came in and just dominated. And he wasn't supposed to be the quarterback; it was supposed to be Trent Green. And they had Marshall Faulk, who was an MVP. They had Isaac Bruce and a rookie Torrey Holt, who were awesome. Eric Azahir Hakim, Ricky Prohl. That defense had so many good players too. And they made the Super Bowl. They dramatically won in a defensive slugfest against the Buccaneers in the NFC Championship. And the Rams were up 16-0, but the Titans slowly came back. And by the end of the third quarter, they were back in this game, tied 16-16 in the fourth quarter. And McNair was playing awesome. Eddie George was just running the ball down the Rams' throat, and they could do nothing about it. Meanwhile, the Rams' offense had been showing out throughout the first half, but Dick Vermeil's defense stepped up. They stopped Steve McNair on a key third down. They got the ball back, and 2-minute warning, they did exactly what a John Elway would do. Kind of pick apart the defense, get first downs, and then 2-minute, they just let it rip. Kurt Warner threw a deep ball to Isaac Bruce, and Isaac Bruce did the rest, went for a game-winning touchdown. And then the Titans did what Steve McNair just pulled out a rabbit out of his butt. And, just like, that play where he just stiff armed a guy, ran right.
Hey, hold on. That was a Chris Mad Dog or so draft booty situation. Wait, what? Pulled the rabbit out of what?
Rabbit. Well, I usually say rabbit out of, but child. Of course, we can't have
Okay.
children. We can't have the
Okay.
children
Alright,
hearing
continue,
some bad
continue.
words, man.
Continue.
Either way, but yeah, So Steve McNair just made an incredible play throwing the ball to Kevin Dyson. Of course, Kevin Dyson was also the guy who did the Music City Miracle earlier that year, and you have that, and it comes down to one play, and McNair throws the ball to Kevin Dyson, and it was 1 yard short. Perfect play by Mike Jones. That is what the Super Bowl is in its finest, coming down to that 1 yard, that 1 inch. Same thing with the Super Bowl 49. And that was the game where it showed the offense of the greatest show on turf, but it was a defensive game throughout. And it was the defense that showed up at the last minute and made the biggest play of the game. And in the words of so many coaches, defense wins championships. That was definitely true in that game. And that's why I would put it as top 10. And there are a lot of honorable mentions, but that one for me is number 10.
So I agree. To be honest with you, close games, when it matters most, you have to execute, and I couldn't agree more. So that's our top 10 Super Bowls, guys. Let us know what you guys think. Again, we appreciate all the feedback that you guys have given for us over this past time. We'll be looking to add more videos in as it goes, but that's it for now. See you guys next time.
Thank you for watching. See you later.